I used to think the scariest thing hiding under my bed was a pile of overdue homework and one sock that had been missing since winter. Then at exactly 2:13 in the morning, my bed started breathing. Not moving, not shaking, breathing. Mattress lifted a little, dropped a little, lifted again, like something under me had lungs the size of a washing machine. I froze with my blanket pulled up to my chin, staring into the dark room of my cheap apartment, listening to the old pipes rattle in the walls and my upstairs neighbor stomp around like he paid rent in earthquakes. At first I told myself it was stress, college exams, 2 part-time jobs, instant noodles 3 nights in a row. A person could hallucinate from that, a person could hear things. Then a blue glow spilled across my floor. I slowly leaned over the edge of the bed and looked down. There, tucked between a cracked floorboard and the bent leg of my bed frame, was a gate. Not a normal gate like the giant ones that opened over cities and spat out monsters for licensed hunters to kill. Those were massive, swirling tiers in the air that looked like someone had punched reality with a galaxy. It came with alarms, evacuations, drone cameras, sponsored hunter teams, and usually at least one arrogant celebrity smiling into the news while covered in monster blood. Mine was the size of a pizza box. It sat flat against the floor, spinning softly, glowing blue, purple, and black. It made a sound like coins rolling across glass. Around the edge, thin sparks crawled like tiny lightning snakes. I stared at it for a long time. Then a claw poked out. My soul left my body, filled out a complaint form, and almost moved to another dimension. But the claw was tiny. It scratched at the air, wiggled, and then a little creature tried to squeeze through. Its head got stuck. It had 2 pebble horns, yellow eyes, and a mouth full of needle teeth, but its body was so small that it looked like a demon had been born inside a lunchbox. It hissed at me. I grabbed my cheapest textbook and slammed it down. There was a squeak, a puff of gray smoke, and 1 black coin bounced across my floor. I stood there in my pajamas, breathing hard, holding Introduction to Economics like a holy weapon. The coin kept spinning. I picked it up with 2 fingers. It was warm. One side had a skull with a crown. The other side had a symbol I could not read. When my thumb brushed it, the coin melted into my skin, and a faint number flashed in my vision. 1. That was it. No dramatic voice, no angel choir, no magical explanation. Just 1. Then my stomach growled so loudly, it sounded like a boss monster. I looked at the gate, I looked at the old textbook, I looked at the half-eaten cup noodles on my desk. And because I was poor, exhausted, and clearly not thinking straight, my first thought was not, I should report this. It was, I wonder if this drops anything else. That was how my secret began. My name is Tyler, and at that time, I was the kind of ordinary student people forgot while I was still standing in front of them. I wore the same hoodie until the sleeves faded. I worked late shifts at a convenience store, copied notes from people who never copied mine, and ate cafeteria leftovers when the staff looked away. Hunters were celebrities, awakened people were miracles. If someone awakened with even a low-rank ability, their life changed overnight. Sponsors called, guilds offered training, fans made edits. Schools gave scholarships, everyone clapped like the universe had personally endorsed them. I had never awakened. At least not officially. The morning after the tiny gate appeared, I went to class with 1 black coin in my stomach, 2 hours of sleep. And a bruise on my forehead from accidentally hitting the bed frame when another little monster tried to bite my ankle. Ben, my only friend and the only person who knew I sometimes watered down ketchup to make soup, dropped into the seat beside me and stared at my face. He asked why I looked like I had fought a raccoon in a dryer. I said I had studied hard. He looked at my unopened backpack and nodded like that was the saddest lie he had ever respected. That whole day, the coin number stayed in the corner of my vision whenever I focused. 1. It hovered there like a lazy firefly. During lunch, I tried to summon it. Nothing happened. I tried saying inventory under my breath. Nothing happened. I tried tapping my forehead in the bathroom glass. Nothing happened, except one guy walked in and immediately walked back out. That night, the gate under my bed opened again. This time, I was ready. Ready in my case meant I wore 3 hoodies, taped magazines to my arms as armor, held a frying pan in one hand, and had a backpack full of plastic bags because I was not leaving loot behind. The gate pulsed softly. I got down on my stomach and crawled toward it. The opening was too small for a person to fit through, which made everything more ridiculous. I poked my hand inside first. My fingers vanished past the glowing surface. Cold air wrapped around them. Then something inside bit me. I yanked my hand back, screamed into my blanket, and saw a tiny tooth hanging from my thumb like a splinter. That should have been enough. Instead, I used a butter knife and my bed frame to widen the cracked floorboards around the gate. The gate did not grow, but the space around it gave me room to slide in sideways. I flattened myself, twisted my shoulder, kicked a pile of laundry away, and crawled through like a broke magician escaping a glowing sewer. The world on the other side was not a giant dungeon. It was a tiny dungeon. I landed on damp stone in a tunnel barely taller than me while I was on my knees. Blue mushrooms glowed along the walls. Pebble-sized bones crunched under my palms. Far ahead, I heard little feet scurrying. A message of light flickered in front of me. Pocket gate recognized. Then it vanished. I waited for more, a tutorial, instructions, a warning, anything. Nothing came. I laughed once because it was either that or cry. A tiny goblin leaped from a mushroom patch, swinging a spoon-sized club. I blocked with the frying pan and the clang echoed like a temple bell. The goblin bounced backwards, stunned. I hit it again. Smoke burst. A bone, 2 coins, and a glowing herb fell to the ground. I stared at the loot. Then I stared at the frying pan. Then I whispered, I am about to become a menace. For the next 3 hours, I crawled through that tiny dungeon like the world's most desperate exterminator. I bonked goblins with a pan, kicked bat-sized slimes into walls, and discovered that blue mushrooms exploded if thrown hard enough. Each monster dropped something weird: black coins, monster bones, bitter herbs. Broken blade tips, a marble with a spark trapped inside. The first time I crushed one of those marbles, heat rushed into my fingers. A skill name flashed in my vision. Quick step. My body moved before my mind did. I zipped 3 feet to the left and slammed shoulder first into a wall. I almost knocked myself unconscious, but when the goblins came at me, I used quick step again. This time I slid past them, swung the pan in a shining arc, and knocked 5 little monsters into one another like bowling pins. My coin number rose to 42. My muscles stopped aching. My vision sharpened. My fear did not disappear, but it got smaller, like the gate had taught it manners. At dawn, I crawled back into my room covered in mud, slime, and mushroom dust. The gate shrank to a glowing crack and went quiet. I shoved everything under my bed, showered with freezing water because I could not pay the gas bill, and went to school. That morning, 3 things happened. First, I accidentally snapped my pencil in half while taking notes. Second, when a ball flew across the campus lawn toward a little kid visiting with a tour group, I caught it without looking. Third, when the class bully tried to shoulder check me in the hallway, he hit me and bounced off like he had run into a vending machine. Everyone stared. I stared too, but I had better survival instincts than all of them. I immediately coughed, pretended my shoulder hurt, and limped away. The secret was simple. The secret was everything. If I reported the pocket gate, official hunters would take it, scientists would seal my apartment, guilds would fight over rights to it, news crews would camp outside, I would become a footnote in someone else's miracle. I had spent my whole life being pushed aside by people with louder voices and cleaner shoes. I was not handing them the first impossible thing that had ever belonged to me. So every night I farmed it. Dungeon reset when the moon was high. Not completely, not like a video game that cared about fairness, more like a stomach growing hungry again. Paths shifted, mushrooms regrew, tiny monsters crawled out of cracks. Treasure stones appeared in new corners. The first week was comedy with injury. I made a spear from a broom handle and a broken goblin blade, then stabbed myself in the sock. I tried using monster bones as armor, but they rattled every time I moved, so I sounded like a skeleton falling downstairs. I captured a tiny slime in a jar, thinking I could study it, but it ate through the glass, bounced onto my alarm clock, and somehow set it to ring at 4:44 every morning. On the 5th night, I met Piper. She was a tiny dungeon creature with silver fur, long ears, and the attitude of a landlord. She fit in my palm, but she stood on a rock like she owned the whole cave. A ring of goblins surrounded her, all holding sharp sticks. Instead of running, she threw a pebble that hit one goblin in the eye, then tried to bite another on the knee. I respected that immediately. I charged in with my frying pan, used quick step, slipped on slime, and still somehow knocked the entire goblin circle into a mushroom patch. The mushrooms exploded blue. The goblins vanished. Piper stood there covered in glowing dust, sneezed once, and pointed at my backpack. I gave her half a granola bar. She followed me home. I did not name her at first. I tried to keep my distance. Secret dungeon pet sounded like the kind of thing that turned into a disaster. But she kept dragging loot out from corners I missed, chewing through monster traps, and slapping me with her tail whenever I made a stupid decision. After she saved me from stepping into a hole full of needle slimes, I called her Piper because she made a little whistling sound when she was annoyed. She hated the name for about 10 seconds. Then I gave her another granola bar. The name became acceptable. By the end of the second week, my room looked normal only if nobody moved anything. Under the bed, I had hidden jars of glowing herbs, stacks of black coins, bones wrapped in towels, broken weapons tied with charging cables, and one tiny chest that hissed whenever I looked at it too long. My life became a pattern. Daytime, I was Tyler, the broke student, who smelled faintly of convenience store coffee. Nighttime, I was Tyler, the underbed dungeon goblin accountant, counting coins and experimenting with monster loot like a lunatic. That was when I discovered duplication. It happened by accident, because most important discoveries happen when you are hungry and impatient. I had found a skill fragment shaped like a cracked glass seed. When I touched it, it showed the words copy hand. I thought it meant I could copy handwriting, which would have been useful for class but not exactly world-shaking. I crushed it anyway. A silver outline appeared around my right hand. I picked up one black coin with my fingers. Another black coin appeared beneath it. I dropped both. I picked up the herb. Another herb appeared. I picked up my frying pan. Another frying pan appeared, then immediately shattered into sparks because the skill could not copy ordinary items for long. But dungeon items stayed. My mouth went dry. Copy hand had rules, but the rules were friendly to poor people with patience. I could duplicate dungeon loot if I had enough coins to feed the skill. Simple items cost little, rare items cost more. Living creatures could not be copied, which Piper seemed to find personally insulting. Skill fragments could be copied only once before the original crumbled. That did not matter. I had a tiny gate that reset every night. And now I had a way to turn one lucky drop into two. The next month became ridiculous. I copied healing herbs until I could stop buying medicine. I copied black coins and fed them back into the dungeon altar I found behind a waterfall the size of a shower leak. I copied broken blade tips and melted them into a dagger that hummed when monsters got close. I copied bone charms that boosted strength, speed, focus, and hearing. At school, my grades shot up because my focus became terrifying. I read a chapter once and remembered every line. I solved math problems faster than the professor could erase the board. Ben noticed first. He asked when I had become secretly smart. I said poverty was motivating. He said that explained half of it, maybe. Ben was important because he never treated me like I was invisible. He joked too much, ate my fries without asking, and once sold his game console to help me pay rent even though he pretended he just hated the console. So I used my first real dungeon profit on him. I had found tiny silver apples growing from a root monster. They tasted like lightning and mint. 1 bite healed fatigue, 2 bites improved stamina. 3 made you run laps around the block while questioning your life choices. I copied a basket of them and slipped a few into Ben's lunch. He ate one, blinked, and suddenly finished an entire essay in 40 minutes. Then he sprinted to the vending machine, bought 6 sports drinks, and accused me of feeding him cursed fruit. I told him it was imported. He asked from where. I said under my bed. He laughed. I laughed. Piper, hiding in my hood, made her little whistle noise like she knew the joke was technically true. Keeping the secret became harder when my body changed. Not in the loud way, not at first. I did not wake up 8 feet tall with glowing hair. I just became sharper. My steps got silent. My reflexes turned unfair. My skin healed overnight. I could lift boxes at work with one hand. When a thief tried to snatch cash from the register, I grabbed his wrist before he finished moving and gently pressed him face first into a rack of potato chips. The police took him away while my manager stared at me. I said I had taken self-defense classes. My manager looked at my noodle cup dinner and said I should ask those classes for a refund. The thief was the first evil person I tricked into punishing himself. He thought I was weak, everyone did. That became my strongest weapon. I started wearing baggier clothes. I slouched more. I kept my voice quiet. When people mocked me, I let them. When they shoved past me, I stepped aside. A person who thinks you are harmless will show you exactly how cruel they are. And when they finally swing, all you have to do is move 1 inch. One night, 3 guys followed me after my shift. I had seen them hanging around the store, watching the register, whispering about the thin kid closing alone. They waited until I took the alley shortcut, then came out smiling with metal pipes. Old Tyler would have run. New Tyler kept walking until the alley camera had a perfect angle. Then I dropped my bag and made my hands shake. They laughed, one swung from my shoulder. I used quick steps so small nobody saw it, and the pipe hit the brick wall hard enough to bounce back into his own forehead. The second guy lunged. I ducked, tapped his ankle with the flat of my dagger hidden in my sleeve, and his leg went numb from a harmless paralysis herb. The third tried to grab me, so I slipped a copied slime bead into his jacket pocket. It burst. Blue goo inflated his clothes like a parade balloon and glued him upside down to a dumpster. By the time the police arrived, all three were groaning on camera while I sat on the ground looking terrified. I even added a little tear. Hyper peeked out from my backpack and gave me a look that said I was becoming dangerous. She was right, but the world was dangerous first. The stronger I got, the more the pocket gate opened its secrets. On the 31st night, I found stairs leading down. On the 40th, a tiny castle appeared in a cavern, no taller than a storage shed, but built with black stone and glowing red windows. Inside, I fought little knights made of bone and rust. They moved fast, using sword forms that would have looked impressive if they were not the size of action figures. I treated them seriously anyway. That was another rule I learned early: never disrespect a small enemy. Small things fit into places big things cannot. Small blades find gaps. Small traps are easy to miss. The castle boss was a skeletal knight riding a rat the size of a Labrador. It charged down a miniature throne room with a lance made from a sewing needle and a banner torn from some ancient flag. I wanted to laugh. Then it stabbed through 3 layers of bone armor and nearly pinned me to the wall. The fight became insane. I jumped between tiny pillars, kicked the rat into a chandelier, copied explosive mushrooms midair, and rained them down like blue comets. The rat burst into smoke. The knight landed on my shoulder and tried to stab my ear. Hyper launched from my hood, drop-kicked the knight in the helmet, and sent it flying into my frying pan. When it died, it dropped a ring. The ring was black iron with a red gem the size of a grain of rice. When I put it on, I learned the skill storage shadow. A pocket of darkness opened behind my hand. I tossed a monster bone into it. The bone vanished. I pulled it out again. I looked at the mountain of loot I had been hiding under my bed for weeks. I laughed until I had to sit down. With storage shadow, the secret became easier. No more glowing herbs in laundry baskets, no more coins under the mattress, no more suspicious bone rattling whenever Ben visited. Everything went into the darkness. My room became clean for the first time in months. The underbed gate still glowed every night, but now I had a routine. Enter after midnight. Clear the first tunnels in 7 minutes. Harvest herbs. Break bone knights. Copy valuable drops. Feed coins into the altar. Train skills until dawn. Sleep in class with my eyes open. Repeat. I was no longer pretending to be normal as well as I thought. A professional hunter visited our school for a recruitment speech. Her name was Grace, and even people who hated hunters knew her. She was an S-Rank, famous for clearing a red gate by slicing a giant serpent in half on live television. She did not wear flashy armor. She wore a plain black coat, moved like a blade, and had eyes that made every noisy person in the auditorium slowly become quiet. I sat in the back with Ben, trying to look bored. Grace spoke about awakening tests, discipline, and how power without control turned people into disasters. I almost listened. Then the demonstration began. Machine at the front measured monopressure. Students lined up and placed their hands on the glass plate. Most got nothing. A few sparked faint colors. One athletic guy who loved making fun of me got a low-rank reading and immediately acted like he had become a god. Ben pushed me forward as a joke. I tried to refuse. The crowd started laughing. The athletic guy said even the machine would feel sorry for me. That was the moment I made a mistake. Not because I got angry. Because I got curious. I placed 2 fingers on the glass plate and tried to suppress everything. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the machine screamed. The glass cracked, the lights flickered, every phone in the auditorium turned off. A shockwave of blue sparks rolled across the floor and made the banners flap like there was a storm inside. The rank display blinked once. Error. Then it melted. Silence fell so hard I could hear Ben swallow. I pulled my hand away and looked at the smoking machine. Then I said the dumbest possible thing. I think I have static. Nobody laughed except Ben, and even he sounded like he was laughing at his own funeral. Grace looked straight at me. That was the first time someone powerful noticed me. I hated it. After the assembly, she found me near the vending machines. I had already planned 13 escape routes, including one that involved jumping through a bathroom window and landing in a recycling bin. Hyper was inside my backpack with a tiny bone knife. Ben stood beside me pretending not to panic. Grace asked how long I had been awakened. I said I was not awakened. She looked at the bandage on my thumb from a dungeon bat. the way my shoes were worn only on the outer edges from fast movement, and the faint mana burn on my sleeve. Then she asked what I was hiding. I smiled like a tired student with nothing to hide. She smiled like a hunter who had killed things that smiled back. For 3 seconds, the air between us got heavy. Then the school alarm rang because the athletic guy had tried to test himself again on the broken machine and somehow set off the sprinklers. I used the chaos to vanish. Grace let me. I knew she let me because I saw her reflection in a glass trophy case. She could have caught me, she did not. That made her more dangerous, not less. The next night, the pocket gate gave me my first real disaster. The tunnel floor had cracked open, revealing a deeper layer filled with hot red light. The air smelled like iron and smoke. Tiny goblins were gone, slimes were gone. Even Piper stopped joking around and hid in my hood. I climbed down using bone spikes as handholds and entered a furnace cave. The monsters there were not cute. They were small, yes, but built like nightmares. Ash wolves with coal eyes, crawling hands made of burnt stone, little fire imps that threw sparks hot enough to melt metal. The first imp hit my shoulder, and my armor smoked. I almost retreated. Then I saw what they were guarding. A vein of crystal ran through the wall, pulsing gold. Every pulse made my skills hum. Mana ores. Real mana ore sold for enough money to change a life. Hunters risked death for fist-sized pieces. Guilds used it to forge weapons, power cities, and make those fancy healing chambers rich people loved. This vein was hidden under my bed. I became extremely motivated. The furnace layer taught me how to fight like a thief instead of a warrior. I could not trade blows with fire monsters, so I cheated. I copied frost herbs from the upper dungeon, crushed them into powder, and packed the powder into hollow monster bones. I made bone grenades. I lured ash wolves into narrow tunnels with copied meat from rat monsters. I used quick step to sprint past them, then kicked the grenades into the pack. Blue frost exploded, turning fire into steam. Against the crawling hands, I used silver apple juice to make the floor slippery and led them into a pit. Against fire imps, I pretended to miss with my dagger so they would laugh and fly closer. Then Piper launched from my hood and slapped paralysis needles into their wings. We fought dirty, we fought smart, we fought like rent was due. By dawn, I had mined 3 chunks of mana ore and nearly collapsed. I copied 1 chunk. The cost drained almost all my coins, and my nose started bleeding, but a second chunk appeared. That was the night I understood the real shape of my power. It was not just strength. It was economy. Every hunter in the world needed gates to appear, guilds to assign them, teams to help clear them, and sponsors to pay for gear. I had a private resource mine that reopened every night. I had a duplication skill that turned rare loot into repeatable profit. I had storage shadow to hide it all. They had fame. I had compound interest with monster bones. My rise began quietly. I sold tiny amounts of mana ore through anonymous channels, never too much, never in patterns. I bought better food, then better shoes, then proper weights for training. I paid my rent 3 months ahead in cash, and my landlord looked at me like I had robbed a wizard. I did not buy a sports car or a penthouse. I bought a stronger bed frame. Then I reinforced the floor. Then I bought soundproofing foam and told the hardware store clerk I was starting a music channel. At night, I trained until my bones felt like glass. During the day, I let everyone underestimate me. But people notice money the way wolves notice blood. Owen noticed first. Owen was not a hunter in the heroic sense. He ran a private guild that liked to appear after battles and collect what others dropped. He had the smile of someone who had practiced being charming in front of polished glass and forgotten to practice being human. His hunters wore sleek uniforms, carried expensive weapons, and looked at civilians like furniture. He came to my convenience store one evening, bought a bottle of water, and asked if I knew anything about rare mana or moving through the black market. I was mopping near the freezer. I said I barely knew how to move the mop. He laughed softly. Then he placed a small crystal on the counter. It was a tracking stone, and it glowed when it faced me. My heart slowed. That was one of the first changes the dungeon made in me. Fear did not vanish. It sharpened. It became a tool. I looked at the glowing stone and widened my eyes. Owen watched my face carefully. I did not deny anything. Denial makes smart people push harder. Instead, I played confused. I asked if the crystal meant I had radiation poisoning. The cashier behind the counter gasped. 2 customers backed away. Owen's smile twitched. The more innocent people looked at him, the less room he had to threaten me. He leaned closer and said I should be careful what I picked up. Some treasures belonged to bigger people. I nodded and asked if I should call emergency services. He left with his expensive hunters and his ruined, dramatic moment. But Owen was not done. That night, 2 of his men broke into my apartment. I was inside the gate. They found an empty room, a cheap bed, and one very angry Piper. When I crawled back out at dawn, the apartment looked like a cartoon had fought a crime documentary. Furniture overturned, curtains shredded, one intruder glued to the ceiling with slime paste. The other wrapped in charging cables, unconscious, with a tiny silver-furred creature sitting on his chest and eating a cracker. I checked the hidden camera I had installed after the alley attack. Perfect footage. The men had picked the lock, entered with weapons, searched the room, and loudly mentioned Owen. I sent the footage to the police and 3 news accounts from a burner email. Then I went to class. By noon, Owen's guild had a public problem. By evening, he had a personal hatred. I did not care. He had made the first move. That meant I could make the next one flashy. A week later, an illegal gate opened beneath an abandoned shopping mall. Officially, it was unregistered and unstable. Unofficially, Owen's people were harvesting it without reporting anything. That meant no evacuation, no safety zone, and no backup if monsters escaped. I learned this because one of the intruders had carried a guild token with a faint mana trail. Piper chewed it, sneezed sparks, and somehow pointed me toward the mall like a furry compass. Ben found me packing weapons into my backpack. He had known something was wrong for months. He was not stupid. He had seen me heal too fast, move too quietly, and feed him fruit that made him accidentally do a standing backflip in the campus gym. He asked if I was in trouble. I told him yes. He asked if it was the kind of trouble where he should call someone. I said not yet. He asked if I had a secret superpower. I said that was a big accusation. Piper climbed out of my hood, holding a bone dagger. Ben stared at her. Piper stared back. Then Ben said he hated that the little creature had better posture than him. That was how Ben became the second person to know. I did not tell him everything. I told him enough. Tiny gate, secret dungeon, loot, dangerous people. His face went through about 15 emotions, including betrayal, awe, panic, and the specific anger of a man realizing every weird thing from the past few months had been connected. Then he asked the most important question. Could I win? I opened Storage Shadow and let black flame roll behind my hand. Inside it, dozens of copied bone blades floated like teeth in the dark. Frost bombs glimmered, mana ore pulsed. The Rat Knight's lance spun slowly beside a chain made from fire imp tails. I said I planned to make winning look accidental. Ben said that sounded illegal. I said so was the mall gate. He paused, then asked if he could run camera support. That was why Ben was my friend. He did not ask to fight monsters. He did not demand power. He just understood that if terrible people were going to attack me, the world should have a high-definition view. The mall was dark when I arrived. Owen's hunters had set up lights around a swirling red gate in the food court. Monsters the size of dogs dragged ore carts from the portal while armed men watched. No armor rival. No heroic duel, just greed in clean uniforms. I slipped through a broken skylight, landed on a hanging banner, and used quick step to cross the rafters without making a sound. Piper rode my shoulder with a tiny mask made from a sock. Below, Owen stood near the gate, giving orders. He looked calm, but his aura had cracks in it. The public scandal had hurt him. Losing stolen mana ore would hurt more. I could have reported the gates and waited. But the monsters were already getting restless. One cart creature bit a handler. Another stared toward the mall exits. If they broke loose into the city, people would die. So I made the hunters attack first. I dropped one black coin from the rafters. It hit the floor beside Owen with a bright ringing sound. Every head turned up. I waved. For half a second, nobody moved. Then Owen shouted to catch me. I ran. That was the trap. They chased me across the mall, through dead shops and empty restaurants, firing spells and throwing blades. I stayed just slow enough to look catchable, just clumsy enough to make them angry. I let a lightning bolt burn my sleeve. I let a thrown dagger cut my cheek. I wanted them committed. I wanted every camera Ben had hidden to see armed guild hunters chasing a student through an illegal gate site. When we reached the old arcade, I vanished behind a row of broken racing games. They spread out. One hunter stepped onto a floor tile where I had placed copied slime paste under a thin layer of dust. His foot stuck. He cursed. Another tried to help and triggered a frost bone under the machine. Ice exploded across the floor, freezing their boots. A third raised his staff. I dropped from the ceiling, tapped his forehead with 2 fingers, and used a skill I had won from a furnace imp captain. Spark snap. A tiny burst of lightning knocked him out without burning him. The others panicked. I pulled 30 copied frying pans from storage shadow. I had kept them as a joke, but copy hand had improved. They lasted almost 10 seconds now. 10 seconds was plenty. I launched them with quick step momentum, and the arcade filled with spinning metal. Pans ricocheted off walls, helmets, machines, and one unlucky disco ball. Hunters dropped one after another, not killed, just humiliated into unconsciousness by kitchen equipment. Ben later told me that clip got 12 million views before breakfast. Owen, of course, did not chase into the arcade. He was smarter than that. He waited near the gate with his strongest people. By the time I returned, the red portal had begun to pulse. The monsters on the other side sensed chaos. The mall floor cracked, heat rose. Something large pushed against the gate from within. Owen looked at me with murder in his eyes. He said I had no idea what I was interfering with. I said he was right, but I was learning fast. He sent 4 hunters at me. I threw 1 silver apple into the air. They flinched, expecting a bomb. Piper shot out from behind a pillar, caught the apple, and sprinted between their feet. They looked down for 1 second. I used that second to pull the Rat Knight's lance from storage shadow, enlarge it with a mana or pulse, and hurl it through the support chain above the food court. The giant hanging sign crashed down, separating the hunters from Owen. Then I turned and entered the illegal gate. The red dungeon inside was bigger than mine, but it felt less personal. It was a burning quarry full of chain bridges, ore pits, and iron beasts. Owen's people had been harvesting the outer area and avoiding the deeper pressure building below. They had not cleared the core. They had poked a sleeping furnace and stolen its teeth. Now it was waking up. I sprinted down the chain bridge as fire beasts climbed from the pits. My secret gate training made the big dungeon feel slow. Everything here was larger, but the patterns were familiar. Fire monster joints glowed before they lunged. Ore veins pulsed near traps. Boss energy gathered like pressure before a storm. I copied frost bombs mid-run, threw them into the beasts' mouths, and kept moving. Piper cut ropes. Ben's drone, which he had bought used and modified with a copied mana crystal, followed from a safe height, streaming everything. At the bottom of the quarry, I found the core guardian. It was a giant furnace golem, shaped like a bull with 6 legs and a horn made of molten ore. Its body was huge enough to crush buses. Its breath turned stone into glass. Compared to the tiny monsters under my bed, this thing was a mountain with anger issues. My heart pounded. Then I smiled. Because size was not the same as intelligence. The golem charged. I used quick step but not away. I ran toward it, slid under its jaw, and slapped copied frost herbs onto the glowing cracks in its chest. Steam blasted me backward. My hood caught fire. Piper slapped it out with her tail while screaming in tiny whistles. The golem roared and slammed a hoof down. I jumped onto the hoof, ran up its leg, and used copy hand on 1 loose plate of molten armor. The copied plate appeared for only a few seconds, but I shoved it into a joint like a doorstop. The golem staggered. I pulled bone chains from storage shadow, wrapped them around its horn, and anchored them to ore pillars. It thrashed, ripping half the quarry apart. Rocks fell like meteors. Then I did something stupid, flashy, and extremely effective. I opened storage shadow above the golem and dumped 3 months of monster bones on its head. Not a handful. Not a bag. A mountain. Every bone I had saved, every copied rib, claw, fang, spine, and skull poured out in a white avalanche. The golem disappeared under the pile. For one glorious moment, the strongest monster in the dungeon got buried by my hoarding problem. Then I snapped my fingers. The bones were not just bones. I had carved frost runes into hundreds of them during boring lectures. They activated at once. The quarry became a winter explosion. Frost swallowed fire. The golem's molten horn cracked. Its legs froze in place. I dropped from above with my dagger glowing black and drove it into the exposed core. The core shattered. The red dungeon collapsed into light. When I emerged back into the mall, covered in soot, frost, and bone dust, every camera was pointed at me. Police lights flashed outside. Official hunters surrounded the building. Owen's men were zip-tied on the floor. Owen himself stood between 2 pillars, pale with rage, because the world had just watched his illegal operation get exposed and cleared by a student with a burned hoodie and a tiny creature on his shoulder. Grace was there too. She looked at me, then at Piper, then at the frying pan sticking out of storage shadow behind my elbow. She said I had been busy. I said finals were stressful. The clip of me burying the furnace golem in bones became the most replayed hunter video of the year. People called me the Bone Avalanche Kid. I hated it. Ben loved it. Officially, the authorities wanted answers. Unofficially, nobody knew what to do with me. I had cleared an unstable gate, saved civilians, exposed criminals, and done it while technically being an unregistered awakened student who had entered a dangerous site without permission. For 3 days, I avoided interviews by pretending to be sick. That worked until Grace knocked on my apartment door. I considered jumping out the window. Then I remembered she could probably catch me before I hit the fire escape. I opened the door. Grace stepped inside, looked around my tiny apartment, then looked at the bed. The gate was quiet, hidden under the frame, but Piper gave it away by sitting directly in front of it like a guard dog the size of a burrito. Grace did not move. Her eyes sharpened. I sighed. The secret was over. Not completely, though. Secrets are like knives. Even when someone sees one, they do not know how many you have hidden. I told Grace part of the truth. Pocket gate, night farming, loot, skills, Owen hunting me. I did not tell her every rule of copy hand. I did not show her all the storage space. I did not mention the altar beneath the mushroom waterfall or the deeper door I had found sealed in black crystal. Grace listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked why I had not reported it. I looked around my room, the cracked walls, the second-hand desk, the cheap heater, the stack of bills I had finally paid. I told her because every time something valuable appears, powerful people call it responsibility and take it from whoever found it. She did not argue. That surprised me. Instead, she said I needed training that did not involve guessing whether a glowing mushroom would explode. I asked if that was an offer or a threat. She said yes. That was how my official hunter life began. Sort of. I still refused to hand over the gate. Grace did not like that. The authorities did not like that. Guilds screamed about safety. News channels debated whether I was a hero, criminal, miracle, danger, or marketing genius. The athletic guy from school gave an interview claiming he had always known I was weird, which was the first true thing he had ever said. But the public loved me. Not because I was polished. I was not. I was awkward, sarcastic, and still wore hoodies. They loved me because every video made expensive hunters look slow and greedy criminals look stupid. My official rank test became a national event. It put me in a reinforced arena with measurement towers, mana shields, drones, and a panel of experts sitting behind glass. Grace stood near the entrance, arms crossed. Ben watched from the stands with a camera and a grin so wide it looked dangerous. Piper hid inside my hood because nobody had successfully told her she was not allowed. The test started simple. Speed. They activated moving targets across the arena. I used quick step. The targets disappeared. Not broke, disappeared. I hit them so fast the sensors could not track the impacts. The screen showed error again, but this time the technicians looked less surprised and more personally offended. Strength. They brought out a mana pillar designed for A ranks. I tapped it. Nothing happened. The panel whispered. Then the pillar split from the inside because I had used spark snap through one finger and sent the force into its core. Control. They released 40 drone blades with blunt edges. I opened storage shadow and pulled out 40 copied frying pans. The crowd started laughing. Then I threw them. Every pan struck a drone at the exact same moment. The drones fell in a perfect circle around me like metal flower petals. The laughter turned into screaming applause. Finally, mana output. They told me to release as much power as I could safely control. That word safely bothered me. So I released enough to make the point, not enough to destroy the arena. Black and blue light rose from my body. The air folded behind me, forming a huge shadow gate full of floating bones, blades, coins, and crystal sparks. Frost curled around my feet. Lightning crawled over my fingers. Piper stood on my shoulder, fur glowing silver, pretending she had planned all of it. The measurement towers overloaded one by one. The panel's glass cracked. Grace smiled for the first time. The final rank appeared after a long delay. SSS. The arena went silent. Then the world exploded. My life did not become easier after that. It became louder. Everyone wanted something. Interviews, sponsorships, guild invitations, training requests, challenges, apologies from people who had mocked me, delivered with the sincerity of vending machine coffee. I ignored most of it. Power did not mean I had to become their mascot. I still lived in the apartment for a while, mostly because moving the bed felt risky. But SSS-Rank painted a target on me, so bright even dumb enemies could see it. Owen was arrested after the mall incident, but he had money, loyal hunters, and hidden friends. He escaped custody during a transport attack 2 weeks after my rank test. The news said unknown accomplices were involved. I watched the report from my couch, while Piper stole cereal from my bowl. Ben called immediately. He asked if I was worried. I said yes. Then I opened Storage Shadow and began sorting weapons. He said that did not look like worry. I said everyone worries differently. Owen did not attack me directly. That would have been stupid, and he was many terrible things but not stupid. Instead, he attacked my image. Fake videos appeared showing me taking loot from gates. Anonymous posts claimed I had caused the mall disaster. People started whispering that my underbed gate was dangerous, that I was hiding monsters, that maybe my power was stolen. The rumors spread fast because jealousy is cheaper than truth. For the first time since becoming strong, I could not solve the problem by hitting it with a pan. So I solved it by being more annoying than the lie. I invited every major news channel, independent hunter analyst, and skeptical commentator to a public demonstration. Grace told me this was a terrible idea. Ben said that meant it would get views. The demonstration took place in a low-risk gate outside the city, a normal D-rank dungeon with stone halls, beetle monsters, and a boss that looked like a crab wearing a rock. The plan was simple. I would clear it while cameras watched. No hidden cuts, no edited footage, no tricks. Except the tricks were the whole point. Before entering, I let a commentator insult me live. He said maybe I was just lucky, maybe all my power came from illegal artifacts, maybe the SSS ranking was a stunt. I nodded politely. Then I asked him to choose any weapon for me from a table of ordinary household objects. He thought I was joking. He picked a toilet plunger. The crowd laughed. Grace put her face in one hand. I took the plunger like a sacred spear and entered the gate. The first beetle monster charged. I vaulted over it, stuck the plunger to its shell, used quick step to spin around it, and flung the beetle into 3 others. Then I copied the plunger 5 times, each copy lasting only seconds, and used them like launching handles to redirect monsters into traps. A beetle tried to bite me. I jammed the plunger into its mouth, kicked the handle, and sent it rolling backward through a wall. Inside the dungeon, I narrated my own tactics calmly so every viewer understood. Monster armor weak at leg joints, sound tells tunnel depth, beetles respond to vibration more than sight. Boss likely ambushes from below because the floor pattern is too clean. Then the rock crab boss burst from the floor exactly where I pointed. I jumped, landed on its back, slapped a copied slime bead onto its eye, and guided it through its own minions. The boss got so confused it smashed half the dungeon for me. At the end, I defeated it by sticking 3 plungers to its shell, pulling them like levers, flipping it upside down, and tapping its core with spark snap. The commentator stopped talking. The internet did not. I sunset the rumors were dead, drowned under clips of an SSS-Rank hunter, clearing a dungeon with plumbing equipment, while explaining monster biology like a cooking show. Owen's smear campaign collapsed. So he changed tactics. He came after Ben. That was the closest I came to losing control. Ben was leaving campus when a black van blocked the street. 3 masked attackers jumped out. They were awakened, not high rank but trained. They grabbed him fast, injected a sleep potion, and dragged him inside. What they did not know was that Ben carried a copied mana bead Piper had chewed into a tracker. He carried it because he thought it looked cool on a keychain. The bead screamed in my head the moment it moved too far away from him. I was inside my pocket gate, fighting a centipede made of knives. I felt the signal. The centipede lunged. I cut it in half without looking and crawled back into my room, so fast the gate sparked behind me. My body moved before anger could make me stupid. Storage Shadow opened. Bone blades armed themselves. Frost bombs clicked into place. The black ring burned on my finger. Piper climbed onto my shoulder, fur standing up. We did not speak. We hunted. The tracker led to an old warehouse near the river. Of course it was a warehouse. Evil people love abandoned warehouses because they have no imagination. I landed on the roof just as Owen arrived below. He looked thinner, rougher, and more dangerous without his expensive public smile. Ben was tied to a chair in the center of the room, awake now, bruised but alive. I heard Owen ask where my gate was. Ben said under his mom's flower garden. Even tied up, he was committed to being useless to villains. One attacker raised a hand to hit him. I dropped through the skylight. Not quietly. I came down like a meteor wrapped in black light. The concrete cracked under my feet. Every light in the warehouse flickered. Bone blades floated behind me in a half circle. Frost crawled across the floor. For the first time, I let Owen see the thing he had been chasing. Not all of it. Enough. He smiled like he had won, because dangerous people always confuse seeing treasure with owning it. He ordered his attackers to take me alive. I said that was adorable. They rushed me. I did not dodge. First swung a chain. I caught it, wrapped it around his wrist, and used his momentum to throw him into two others. The second released a burst of fire. I copied a frost bone, crushed it, and walked through the steam. The third tried to stab me from behind. Piper hit him in the neck with a sleep needle and rode him to the ground like a victorious squirrel. Owen pulled a stolen artifact from his coat. It was a red crystal heart, probably taken from an uncleared gate. It pumped mana into his body, making his veins glow. His aura swelled. The warehouse floor shook. He became stronger fast. Also unstable. I could see cracks forming in the artifact. That was Owen's problem. He wanted shortcuts so badly he forgot shortcuts still had cliffs. He attacked with a blade of red energy. I blocked with bone shields, each one shattering. He was not weak. He was desperate, and desperation with power can kill. He drove me back across the warehouse, smashing pillars, slicing crates, burning holes through metal. Ben shouted something, but the sound drowned under the roar. I kept retreating. Owen laughed. He thought I was losing. I was measuring. Every red strike made the artifact pulse. Every pulse widened the cracks. Every time he used too much power, the crystal heart pulled mana from nearby objects to stabilize itself. It was hungry. So I fed it. I opened Storage Shadow and released a trail of black coins across the floor. Owen saw them and attacked harder, thinking I was dropping loot in panic. The crystal heart drank the coin's dungeon mana. Its glow brightened, cracks spread. I dropped more coins. Then mana ores. Then copied fire crystals. Owen's power surged wildly. His blade grew huge. He swung it at me with a roar. I quick-stepped behind him, not to strike, but to cut Ben's ropes. Ben rolled away as the red blade hit the floor where he had been. The artifact sucked in the last pile of crystals and began screaming. Owen finally looked down. The crystal heart burst. Not an explosion, a mana backlash. Red light wrapped around his arms and locked them in place like glowing chains. The stolen power he had forced into himself turned heavy, pinning him to the floor. I walked over and crouched in front of him. He spat that I had cheated. I told him yes. Then the police stormed the warehouse with Grace at the front. Ben, because he was Ben, had started livestreaming from the moment I crashed through the roof. Owen's kidnapping, the stolen artifact, the attack, everything was recorded. There would be no escape this time. Grace looked at the frozen attackers, the smashed warehouse, the tied-up criminals, the black coins scattered everywhere, and Ben waving weakly at his own camera. She asked if I could ever solve a problem quietly. I said I lived with a secret gate under my bed for months. She admitted that was fair. Owen went to jail for real after that. And for a while, things almost felt peaceful. Almost. Peace for an SSS-Rank hunter is not the absence of danger. It is the period between bigger disasters. My pocket gate kept growing deeper, not because of me, not because the world was reacting, but because I had finally become strong enough to reach what had always been there. The black crystal door beneath the mushroom waterfall opened after I placed 3 boss cores into its sockets. Beyond it was a vertical dungeon, a tower descending into the dark. Each floor was the size of a room, connected by spiraling ladders and stone elevators. It reminded me of the floating castles in old virtual reality games Ben loved, except upside down and designed by someone who hated knees. The first deep floor was a library filled with books that bit. The second was a kitchen where ghost chefs tried to season me. The third was a miniature battlefield where toy soldiers fired real cannons. Every night became a new problem to solve. I did not just get stronger, I got stranger. From the biting library, I gained Page Guard, a skill that let me create paper-thin shields with written commands. At first, the shields were weak. Then I copied dungeon parchment, wrote simple words like stop, slide, turn, and drop, and discovered that the shields obeyed basic intent. A monster charged, and I held up a paper shield marked turn. It turned straight into a wall. I laughed so hard the next book bit my ankle. From the ghost kitchen, I gained Spice Flash, a useless-sounding skill that created bursts of blinding powder. Combined with frost herbs and slime paste, it became the most disrespectful combat style I had ever used. I once defeated a butcher spirit by making it sneeze so hard it dropped its cleaver, then bonking it with the flat side. From the toy battlefield, I gained Mini Forge. That changed everything. Miniforge let me combine small dungeon items into temporary weapons instantly. Bone plus fire crystal became a flame dagger. Mushroom cap plus slime bead became a bounce bomb. Coin plus paper shield became a decoy that looked like a glowing version of me for 3 seconds. 3 seconds of decoy is forever when your enemies are dumb enough to monologue. I began building combinations. Coin decoys carrying frost bombs. Paper shields that redirected fire into slime traps. Bone chains tipped with sleep herbs. Tiny cannons hidden in storage shadow that fired copied pebbles with enough force to punch through stone. Flashy power was fun, but clever power was addictive. Grace trained me during the day when she could catch me. She taught me real sword footwork, mana breathing, and how to read the shoulders of opponents instead of their weapons. She also hit me with wooden practice blades whenever I got cocky, which was often. She never became my partner. I did not need someone following me into every fight, but she became the person who reminded me that being the strongest did not mean being finished. Ben handled information. He built channels, watched rumors, tracked suspicious guild movements, and edited my public videos so they made me look mysterious instead of sleep-deprived. He also named half my moves without permission. Piper remained Piper. She stole snacks, found treasure, and occasionally saved my life by biting things much larger than herself. My circle stayed small. That was how I liked it. Fame brought challengers. Most were harmless. Some wanted to test themselves. Some wanted clicks. Some wanted to say they had faced the Bone Avalanche Kid and survived. I started refusing public duels because I had homework, and also because humiliating people every week was becoming a scheduling issue. Then a group of criminal awakened fighters began attacking low-rank hunters near small gates. They were not random thugs. They were organized, smart enough to avoid cameras, cruel enough to leave victims alive but broken. They stole loot, weapons, and cores. They mocked the weak because nobody scary had shown up yet. Ben found the pattern. Grace wanted to coordinate a sweep. I had a different idea. I would become bait. Not as SSS Tyler, as broke-looking, hoodie-wearing, apparently clueless Tyler carrying an obviously fake bag of mana crystals near a low-rank gate at night. Grace said it was reckless. Ben said it was content. Piper sharpened a toothpick. I walked alone under a highway overpass with my hood up and shoulders hunched. The fake mana crystals glowed in my bag. I made sure to stumble once. I made sure to look around nervously. I made sure the hidden cameras Ben placed had every angle. The attackers appeared exactly on schedule. There were 6 of them, no dramatic armor, no speeches worth remembering, just people with power who had decided the world owed them victims. They surrounded me. One told me to hand over the bag. I hugged it to my chest and backed up. He smiled and stepped closer. I could feel their confidence. It was thick, sloppy, and delicious. He grabbed the bag. I let him. The moment he pulled it open, a coin decoy of me popped out, waved, and exploded into spice flash. White powder filled the overpass. The attackers cursed, blinded. I moved inside the cloud like a ghost. First attacker, ankle tap with paralysis herb. Second attacker, paper shield marked drop under his feet. He fell flat. Third attacker, slime bead to the elbow, so his weapon stuck to his own jacket. Fourth attacker, bone chain around the waist, and a gentle throw into a mattress I had placed behind a pillar earlier because I was powerful, not rude. The fifth tried to run. Hyper tripped him with a thread made from spider silk and pure disrespect. The sixth was stronger. He cleared the powder with a wind skill and saw me standing in the middle of his defeated friends. For a moment, he understood. Not enough to surrender. He raised both hands, forming a spinning drill of air. I opened storage shadow. Behind me, 100 copied plungers floated in perfect rows. His face challenged. That was the last thing he saw before the plunger storm. Again, nobody died. That mattered. I did not want to become what I hunted. But by the time the police arrived, the criminals were wrapped, stuck, frozen, dizzy, and surrounded by enough evidence to make denial embarrassing. The public loved the overpass video, even more than the mall fight. The message was clear. If evil people came after the weak, they might be attacking me in disguise. Crime around small gates dropped for 3 weeks. Then the sky over the city split open. The gate appeared at sunset above the central district, huge and violet, its edges crackling like broken glass. Every phone alarm screamed. Traffic stopped. People poured into the streets and stared upward as the air twisted into a spiral. A high-rank gate. Not under my bed, not secret, not tiny. This one was big enough to swallow a stadium. Official hunters mobilized. Grace called me before the emergency alert finished. She said they needed me. I was already moving. The staging area looked like organized panic. Barriers went up, medics prepared tents, hunters checked weapons, drones circled, news helicopters kept a distance after one almost got clipped by a purple lightning arc. I arrived wearing a black coat over my hoodie because Ben insisted SSS-Rank required at least one piece of dramatic clothing. The crowd saw me and roared. I hated how much I liked it. Grace briefed the team. The gate pressure suggested a multi-layer dungeon, monsters unknown, time until outbreak uncertain. If the boss was not cleared before the gate destabilized, the city would face a wave. Hunters looked at me with mixed expressions. Hope, jealousy, doubt, fear. Some had mocked me online. Some had challenged me and been ignored. Now they were waiting to see if the kid with the secret bed gate was actually worth the rank. I looked up at the violet portal. For months I had crawled into danger alone while the world slept. Now the whole world was watching. I stepped through first. Dungeon beyond was a floating ruin suspended in a violet sky. Broken towers drifted above endless clouds. Stone bridges connected islands. Gravity bent in weird angles. Monsters moved between platforms like shadows with wings. It was beautiful. It was also trying to kill us immediately. A swarm of glass birds dove from above, their wings slicing the air into blades. Hunters raised shields, spells fired. The first clash shattered the entrance platform. I jumped. Quick step carried me up a falling slab. I opened storage shadow and released paper shields marked turn across the sky. The glass birds hit the invisible commands and curved away, slamming into one another in sparkling explosions. Then I copied the broken glass feathers before they faded and used mini forge. Feather plus bone plus lightning spark. A new weapon formed in my hand, a chain of glass blades humming with electricity. I swung it once. The sky lit up. The hunters behind me stared as 100 glass birds fell in pieces. Grace shouted for formation, but I was already moving to the next bridge, not because I wanted to show off. Well, not only because. The dungeon pressure pulled from the farthest tower. That was where the core waited. First island held winged beasts with stone masks. They attacked in squads, coordinated, diving and retreating. I did not chase them. I threw coin decoys across the island, each one glowing like a wounded target. The beasts swarmed the decoys. Every decoy carried a bounce bomb. The island became a carnival of bad decisions. Monsters bounced into each other, into walls, off bridges, and one unfortunate beast ricocheted through a tower window and came out the other side without its mask. Hunters followed, cleaning up what survived. The second island had gravity traps. Step wrong and you fell upward into spinning rocks. Several hunters got caught, floating helplessly. I used bone chains to pull them down, then realized the traps could be useful. When a giant shadow centipede crawled across the bridge, I lured it onto the trap field. It lunged. I quick stepped under it and slapped a paper shield marked up on its belly. The centipede shot into the sky. Then I used copy hand on a gravity stone and dropped the copy above it. The copy reversed the force. The centipede slammed back down so hard the bridge bounced. Hyper, riding in my hood despite every safety rule, whistled approval. The third island was where things went wrong. The dungeon had a mid-boss, a violet knight made of smoke and crystal, not a reflection creature. It did not copy me. It did not copy anyone. It simply cut space. Its sword swung and distance vanished. A hunter 30 feet away got sliced across the chest before he could react. Grace blocked the next strike and still slid backward, boots carving lines into stone. The knight moved without footsteps. For the first time in a long time, I could not predict the pattern. It attacked me and I used quick step. The cut followed. Pain tore across my side, blood hit the stone. The watching hunters froze. The crowd outside, watching through drones, must have gone silent. I pressed a healing herb to the wound and smiled even though it hurt. Finally, something interesting. The knight raised its sword again. I stopped moving fast. That sounds wrong, but speed was losing. The knight's blade did not chase bodies. It cut the space where intention led. Every time I committed to a dodge, the sword shortened the distance. So I became indecisive on purpose. I flooded the field with coin decoys. 10 Tylers ran left, 10 ran right, 5 jumped, 3 fell dramatically, 1 waved. The knight paused. Not confused like a dumb monster, calculating. I used that pause to set paper shields in a spiral around it, each marked with different commands. Turn, drop, slide, stop, up, down. The knight swung. Space twisted. But the commands twisted the path too. The cut bent, skipped, and struck one of my decoys instead. I saw the rule. Its sword could erase distance, but only along a clean line of intent. So I made the battlefield messy. I threw bounce bombs, frost dust, glass feathers, bone chains, and decoys in every direction. I turned the island into a storm of nonsense. The knight's perfect cuts started hitting the wrong targets. Grace saw it and adapted instantly, striking whenever its blade missed. The final move was pure disrespect. I copied a plunger. Yes, again. I mini-forged it with a gravity stone and a glass feather, creating the ugliest legendary weapon ever born. Then I quick-stepped behind the knight and stuck it to the back of its helmet. The gravity plunger yanked upward. The knight's head snapped back. Grace's blade pierced its core. The violet knight shattered into crystal rain. A skill fragment fell. Space hook. I crushed it before anyone could say that looked dangerous. The world folded around my finger. A thin black hook appeared, hanging from nothing. I flicked it toward a distant pillar, and my body snapped toward it like I had grabbed the air itself. Quick step had made me fast. Space hook made the sky belong to me. The final tower floated far beyond the islands, protected by a storm ring. Bridges had collapsed. Flying monsters circled the gap. The hunter team could not cross safely. Grace said we needed a plan. I looked at the storm. Then I looked at the hundreds of broken stone slabs drifting below. I had a plan. It was stupid enough to work. I opened Storage Shadow and released every copied bone chain I had. I hooked them to slabs, towers, and gravity stones. Then I used Space Hook to launch myself into the storm, dragging the chains behind me. Wind tore at my coat, lightning snapped around my face, glass birds screamed. I moved from slab to slab, fastening chains, throwing paper shields, anchoring gravity stones. Behind me, the broken debris began forming a pass. Not a bridge. A moving staircase made of dungeon junk, held together by shadow chains, paper commands, and my complete lack of respect for engineering. Hunters crossed one by one while monsters attacked. I defended the path from above, swinging glass lightning chains, pulling enemies off course with Space Hook, and dropping frost bombs into the storm. Every flashy move fed the next. Every broken monster became material. Every material became another weapon. By the time we reached the final tower, even the hunters who hated me were cheering. Inside waited the boss. It was a dragon, but not the giant fire kind people put on posters. This one was long and thin, made of violet bone, storm clouds, and glowing eyes stacked along its neck. Coiled around the tower interior, wings folded like cathedral walls. Its breath bent gravity. Its claws tore holes in stone. The moment we entered, it whispered into everyone's mind. Not words, doubt. I felt every insult I had ever heard. Poor, weak, nobody, cheater, joke, lucky, dangerous, fraud. For a second, my knees almost bent. Then Piper bit my ear. Pain cleared my head. I looked at the dragon and laughed. It had picked the wrong insecurity. I had spent my whole life being doubted. At this point, doubt was basically home decor. The battle began. Grace led the hunters against the wings, cutting storm currents before they crushed the team. I went for the neck. Space Hook pulled me between pillars as the dragon snapped at me with jaws full of violet fire. I threw decoys into its eyes, chained its horns to broken columns, and used page guard commands to redirect gravity bursts. The dragon adapted slowly, not to me specifically, just to the battle. It was ancient and strong, but strength that big takes time to turn. I was tiny compared to it. I had practice being tiny. I crawled along its spine, planted frost bones in the gaps, and dodged lightning teeth. When it rolled, I hooked space to its own ribs and stayed attached. When it breathed upward, I opened Storage Shadow and dumped copied glass feathers into the blast. The feathers superheated, then I pulled them out with bone chains and rained molten needles onto its wing joints. The dragon roared. The tower cracked. The boss core glowed inside its chest, protected by layers of violet bone. I needed one clean shot. The dragon knew it. It wrapped itself around the core, eyes blazing. Hunters could not get close. Grace was holding the left wing back alone, blood on her sleeve, still smiling like this was what she had been born for. Ben's drone crackled through the interference, still recording from a hole in the tower wall. The whole city was watching. I reached into Storage Shadow and felt everything I had gathered since night one. Goblin bones, black coins, silver apples, frost herbs, fire crystals, rat night lance pieces, paper shields, slime beads, broken weapons, mana ore, tiny cannonballs. Plungers because Ben insisted I keep some for brand identity. All that weirdness. All that desperation. All those nights crawling under my bed while everyone slept. I combined it. Mini Forge screamed. A weapon formed in my hands, bigger than anything I had made. A ridiculous spear built from bone, glass, frost, fire, lightning, paper commands, and one toilet plunger at the end, because the skill apparently had a sense of humor. Ben later called it the junkyard god's spear. I called it expensive. The dragon opened its mouth. Violet gravity fire gathered. I used space hook on the far wall, launched myself directly into the blast, and threw every paper shield in front of me. Stop burned. Turn shattered. Slide melted. Drop exploded. Each command bought half a second. Half a second was enough. I pierced through the breath, slammed into the dragon's chest, and drove the junkyard god's spear into the bone shell. It cracked, but not enough. The dragon's eyes focused on me. I felt its power crushing down. Then Piper leaped from my shoulder, ran along the spear, and jammed a black coin into the crack. Copy hand activated through my grip. 1 coin became 2. 2 became 4. 4 became 8. Coins multiplied inside the crack, forcing the bone apart from within. The cost tore through my mana like fire. My vision blurred. My fingers went numb. I kept copying. The dragon thrashed. Grace shouted. The shell split open. I pushed the spear deeper and released sparks snap through the entire weapon. Lightning, frost, fire, and shadow detonated inside the core. The violet dragon shattered. Not into smoke. Into falling stars. The tower opened to the sky as the dungeon collapsed. Hunters were pulled back through the gate in waves of light. I grabbed Piper, hooked space to Grace's blade, and dragged us out just before the final island cracked beneath us. We landed in the central district, under the real evening sky. For 1 second there was silence. Then every screen in the city showed the gate closing. People screamed my name. Not Bone Avalanche Kid. Tyler. That hit harder than the dragon. I stood in the street with torn clothes, smoking boots, and Piper proudly holding a dragon scale twice her size. Grace leaned on her sword beside me. Ben ran through the barrier and hugged me so hard my cracked ribs complained. The hunters who had doubted me bowed their heads. The commentators who had mocked me called it the greatest gate clear in modern history. The world finally understood. I was not lucky. I was not a gimmick. I was the kid who had found a gate under his bed and farmed it every night until even dragons became loot problems. After the Violet Gate, the city changed around me. Kids wore hoodies with fake shadow pockets. Toy companies made Piper plushies without her permission, which she tried to attack through the television. Training schools added underdog strategy classes. Low-rank hunters started carrying cheap tools into gates because my videos proved that a normal object in clever hands could become a miracle. I received more offers than I could read. I ignored most of them. I bought a better apartment, but I kept the old one too. Not for nostalgia. For the bed. Moving the gate was impossible. Believe me, I tried lifting the frame once and the floor growled at me, so I renovated around it. The old apartment became a secret training room with reinforced walls, hidden cameras, emergency seals, snack cabinets for Piper, and a bed frame made from reinforced dungeon alloy. Ben called it the world's most dangerous bunk bed. Grace called it irresponsible. Then she used it to enter the pocket gate for controlled research exactly once. The gate rejected her. Not violently, just rudely. She crawled halfway through, got stuck at the shoulders, and the portal made a sound like a burp before pushing her back into the room. Grace sat on the floor for a long moment. I did not laugh. Ben did. Piper did something worse. She brought Grace a silver apple as consolation and patted her boot. Grace threatened all of us with training. The truth became clear. The pocket gate was mine in a way nobody could explain. Others could reach through for a second. Piper could pass because she came from inside, but the deeper paths opened only for me. That should have made me feel special. Instead, it made me careful. Special things attract special disasters. For a few weeks, I focused on the deep tower. The floors became more dangerous, but also more absurd. On one floor, I fought a swarm of umbrella bats during a sideways rainstorm. On another, I defeated a giant living wardrobe that tried to trap me in formal clothes. Another floor held a clockwork pond full of fish that exploded if you lied near them, which taught Ben never to ask through the camera whether I had finished my assignments. Each floor gave me better materials. Clock gears that slowed falling objects. Storm silk that stored movement. Moon chalk that made written commands last longer. A skill called swap mark that let me switch places with a marked object once every few minutes. That skill turned me from unfair to disgusting. I marked a pebble, threw it behind a monster, let the monster charge me, then swapped places and watched it slam into a wall. I marked a frying pan, launched it into the air, then swapped mid-fight to dodge attacks from impossible angles. I marked one of Ben's drones once by accident, appeared 30 feet above the campus fountain, and had to pretend it was parkour practice. My public fights became legendary because nobody knew what would happen next. One week I cleared a gate by turning the boss's own trap room into a pinball machine. Another week I stopped a runaway monster train by swapping places with its brake lever, which made no sense mechanically but worked because dungeon machines have terrible legal departments and no one to complain to. Another time, a gang of awakened thieves tried to rob a Manhwa convoy. I arrived late, wearing sweatpants because Piper had hidden my boots. The thieves laughed at me. I tossed one pebble into their getaway truck. They fired spells. I swapped with the pebble, appeared in the driver's seat, and drove the truck in a perfect circle while they chased it on foot. Then I opened storage shadow and dropped slime paste across the road. The entire gang slid into a neat pile beside the police barricade. When the officers arrived, I handed them the keys. The thieves kept saying I had no right to embarrass them like that. I told them they should have committed cooler crimes. The more ridiculous my victories became, the angrier certain people got. Not Owen anymore. He was locked away, watched, and stripped of resources. But there were always people who believed strength should look a certain way. Serious, expensive, dramatic in the correct direction. I did not fit. I was the SSS hunter who used monster bones like building blocks, carried snacks for a tiny dungeon creature, and treated enemy arrogance like a free resource. That made people underestimate me even after they knew better. One elite guild invited me to a public exhibition. Their leader, unnamed here because he does not deserve the search traffic, claimed it would be friendly. Ben found messages suggesting they planned to overwhelm me with coordinated attacks and prove my style only worked on monsters. Grace advised declining. I agreed. Then I went anyway. Not because I needed to prove myself. Because the messages showed they had also planned to pressure weaker hunters into joining them afterward. They wanted a stage, so I gave them one. The exhibition arena was packed. The elite guild entered in perfect formation, all shining weapons and serious faces. I entered carrying a cardboard box. The announcer asked what was in the box. I said emotional support. Inside were 30 rubber balls, 20 copied slime beads, 10 paper shields, a bag of monster chalk, and one very annoyed Piper wearing a tiny referee whistle. The rules said non-lethal force only. Perfect. Guild attacked in formation. 2 front fighters rushed me. 3 ranged attackers fired from behind. 1 controller shaped the ground into spikes. I threw the cardboard box into the air. Swap mark. I vanished. The front fighters hit the box, which burst open. Rubber balls scattered everywhere, each marked with moon chalk commands. Bounce. Turn. Trip. Stop. The arena became chaos in 3 seconds. Their perfect formation turned into a slapstick disaster with mana consequences. Ranged spells curved into shields. Ground spikes lifted their own teammates. Slime beads stuck boots to floor panels. Piper blew her tiny whistle every time someone fell, which made the crowd laugh harder. Their leader stayed calm longer than the others. He tried to trap me in a ring of stone. I let him. The crowd gasped as walls rose around me. Then I swapped with a rubber ball bouncing behind him. He turned just in time to see me tap his shoulder. Spark snap. He dropped to one knee, stunned but unharmed. I leaned down and told him a formation is only perfect until someone changes the shape of the room. The crowd heard it through the arena microphones. After that, his plan to recruit weaker hunters with intimidation looked ridiculous. That was my favorite kind of victory, the kind where the punishment was not pain but exposure. Still under the jokes and applause, I knew I was changing. There were nights in the pocket gate when I moved through monsters without thinking, when battles became math and fear came too late to matter. There were mornings when I looked at my hands and remembered they had crushed cores, broken towers, and pulled dragons from the sky. Power can make the world feel small. The pocket gate kept me humble by trying to murder me with increasingly stupid hazards. The Deep Tower's next major floor was a carnival. Not a fun carnival, a dungeon carnival, which meant smiling masks, rigged games, and cotton candy that tried to strangle me. The floor boss was a ringmaster made of stitched shadows who controlled traps through music. Every drumbeat changed the room. Every trumpet blast opened cages. Every cymbal crash dropped blades. I could not simply rush him because the floor moved with the song. So I ruined the rhythm. I had collected clockwork fish from the lying pond. They exploded when exposed to false statements, which was useless until I realized carnival signs were full of lies. Win every time. No danger. Guaranteed prize. I threw the fish at the signs. The entire carnival started detonating. The ringmaster's music skipped, traps fired out of order, a cage opened under him instead of under me. He stumbled. I used Space Hook to swing from a crooked Ferris wheel, dropped onto his stage, and challenged him to his own knife-throwing game. He accepted because monsters with themes have no self-control. His knives flew toward me. I swapped with the prize teddy bear behind him. The knives pinned his coat to the wall. Piper stole the ringmaster's hat. I finished him with a paper shield marked quiet. The music died. The reward was absurd. A red ticket called Encore. Once per battle, it could repeat the last skill I used without paying the full cost. Copy hand plus Encore. I sat on the carnival floor, staring at the ticket. Then I whispered, "That is illegal." Piper nodded. With Encore, duplication became monstrous. I still had limits. I could not create infinite boss cores or copy living things, but rare materials, temporary weapons, tactical items, I could double then repeat. The cost was lower on the second use, which meant my economy exploded again. I did not show anyone right away. Some cards should stay hidden until the final table. That final table arrived sooner than expected. A cluster of gates opened across the city in one night. Not one giant disaster. 5 separate gates, each mid-rank, spread across neighborhoods. Official teams mobilized, but the timing was brutal. Too many locations, too many civilians, too much chance of a breakout. It did not feel like the world reacting to me. Gate clusters happened rarely, like earthquakes of mana. This one was bad luck sharpened into a knife. Grace took command of one site. Other hunters split to cover the rest. I was asked to choose the most dangerous gate. I chose all of them. They told me that was impossible. I had been hearing that word since before the gate under my bed. Ben pulled up city maps, traffic feeds, drone paths, and evacuation routes. Piper sorted small bombs by flavor, which was disturbing but efficient. I marked 5 objects, one near each gate: a drone, a street sign, a thrown coin, a police barricade, and Grace's spare training blade. Swapmark had range limits, but with mana ore anchors and Space Hook, I could chain movements across the city. The night became a blur. Gate 1 was in a subway station. Stone worms crawled through tunnels, threatening to derail evacuation trains. I swapped with the drone, landed on the platform, and flooded the tracks with frost slime. Worms slid past the train and crashed into a wall. I marked their boss, hooked Space to a ceiling beam, and yanked its head into a support pillar hard enough to stun it. Then I left a team to finish the core. Gate 2 opened near a hospital. Flying leeches with glass teeth swarmed the roof. I appeared on the police barricade, launched paper shields, marked shield around the windows, and used spice flash mixed with healing herb smoke. The leeches followed the scent, got dizzy, and flew straight into copped nets made of storm silk. Gate 3 swallowed part of a parking garage. Metal spiders nested between cars, weaving explosive wire. I swapped with the street sign, landed on the 3rd level, and used mini forge to create magnet bombs from ore dust and clock gears. The spiders stuck to their own webs. I drove a compact car through the nest because the keys were still inside, and sometimes the dungeon provides. Gate 4 opened at a riverside park. Mud giants pulled themselves from the water, each one regenerating as long as it touched the river. I arrived through Grace's spare blade, which made her shout at me through comms. I used Space Hook to pull broken playground equipment into a ring, then froze the river surface with every frost bone I had. The mud giants tried to heal, found no water, and collapsed into piles of angry dirt. Gate 5 was the worst. It opened under a school gym during a late practice. Students were trapped in the bleachers, while shadow hounds circled below. Their coach held them back with a baseball bat in pure panic. I swapped with the thrown coin, appeared between the hounds and the students, and every shadow hound turned toward me. For a moment, I saw myself in them. Small things from dark places, underestimated until they bite. Then one lunged at a student. I stopped feeling poetic. Storage shadow opened behind me like a black sunrise. I released the plunger storm, the bone chains, the paper shields, the frost bombs, the glass feathers, and every ridiculous weapon that had become my legend. I moved through the gym like a natural disaster wearing sneakers. Hounds flew into basketball hoops. Slime beads glued jaws shut. Paper commands sent monsters sliding across polished floors. Hyper ran along the bleachers, cutting trapped students free from shadow webs. The boss hound emerged last, huge and silent, with a mane of black fire. It ignored me and charged the bleachers. I used Encore. Copy hand repeated on a pile of storm silk nets. One net became two, two became four, four became eight. I threw them all with space hook, wrapping the boss mid-charge. It tore through the first layers, then slowed. I swapped with a net knot on its back, landed between its shoulders, and drove a bone dagger into the shadow core. The hound dissolved 1 inch from the bleachers. The students stared. One whispered that I was real. I almost laughed. I had wondered the same thing when the gate first opened. By sunrise, all 5 gates were cleared. No civilian deaths. Minimal injuries. Maximum property damage, mostly from me driving that compact car through a spider nest and using a vending machine as a projectile at the subway station. The city called it a miracle. Grace called it reckless. Ben called it the best night of his editing career. I called it proof. Not that I was strong, everyone already knew that. Proof that strength did not have to look noble from a distance. Sometimes strength looked like a student crawling under his bed with a frying pan. Sometimes it looked like a tiny creature biting monsters on the ankles. Sometimes it looked like making evil people reveal themselves, then letting cameras and consequences do the rest. After the gate cluster, the mockery finally stopped. Not completely, the internet can insult a sunset, but in the real world, people lowered their voices when I passed. Hunters who had ignored me asked for advice. Students who once laughed in hallways now stepped aside, not from fear exactly, but from the sudden realization that the person they had treated like background noise had been fighting a secret war beneath his floorboards. I returned to campus one afternoon to finish paperwork for graduation, which was the only paperwork I will mention because even SSS hunters cannot defeat academic offices with a frying pan. The athletic guy saw me in the hallway and turned pale. He apologized. It was awkward, rushed, and probably motivated by survival. I accepted anyway. Then I walked past him like he was nothing. That felt better than revenge. Revenge ties you to people who hurt you. Winning lets you leave them behind. For about 3 days after that, I thought the city might finally let me breeze. That was adorable of me. The problem with climbing higher than everyone who mocked you is that the view improves, but so does the target on your back. Before, people laughed because I looked weak. Now they smiled because they wanted something. Some wanted my training method, some wanted my weapons. Some wanted me to join their teams, their brands, their fan channels, their little circles where everyone acted friendly while counting how much money my name could print. And then there were the ones who did not bother smiling. They followed me in black cars with tinted windows. They sent drones that pretended to be news cameras. They placed cheap Mana sensors outside my apartment, as if the secret of my life would politely leak through the wall and introduce itself. One guy even dressed as a delivery driver and brought an empty pizza box to my door. I opened it. Inside was a tracking bug. I stared at it. He stared at me. Then Piper climbed onto my shoulder, wearing the empty pizza saver like a crown, and hissed. The fake delivery driver dropped the box and ran so fast his scooter almost left without him. I did not chase him. I copied the tracking bug 30 times, stuck one on his scooter, one under each tire, one inside his helmet, and sent the rest crawling after him using tiny dungeon beetles trained with crumbs and spite. Ben watched the footage later and laughed so hard he choked on his drink. Grace did not laugh. She folded her arms across the table in my apartment, glanced at the glowing edge under my bed, and told me people like that never stopped at spying. I knew she was right. That was why I had already made 3 plans. Plan 1 was the boring plan, which meant moving apartments. I hated it instantly. My whole life had changed because a dungeon opened under my bed. Leaving the bed felt rude. Also, the gate did not like being moved. When I tried to drag the frame 2 inches to vacuum, the gate made a noise like an offended violin, and the whole room smelled like burnt cinnamon for an hour. Plan 2 was letting Grace station hunters outside my building. I hated that more. A secret is not protected by surrounding it with people who ask questions for a living. Plan 3 was my favorite. Make the people watching me believe they had found an opening. Then open it wider. Next night I walked home alone on purpose. I wore my oldest hoodie, carried a plastic grocery bag, and limped a little, just enough to make it look like the school gym fight had left me hurt. I took the long way through a quiet alley between a closed laundromat and an abandoned pet store. Every step echoed off brick walls, streetlights buzzed overhead, rainwater dripped from fire escapes. Behind me, 3 shadows turned into the alley. They were not monsters. Monsters were honest. Monsters hissed, charged, bit, clawed, and generally explained their intentions with their teeth. People were messier. These three wore plain masks and carried mana cuffs, shock rods, and one black needle gun meant to punch through Hunter's skin. They moved like trained fighters, spreading out without talking. The one in front lifted the gun. I raised my hands and gave them my best terrified student face. It was not hard. I had spent most of my life looking like that. He told me to stay quiet. I nodded. He stepped closer. Then his boot landed on a black coin. The alley vanished. To be clear, it did not really vanish. I was not that dramatic yet. But I had spent the afternoon using copy hand on paper talismans made from dungeon bark, then marked every brick, trash can, and puddle with tiny command words. When the first attacker stepped on the coin, storage shadow opened beneath the alley like a stage curtain, swallowing light and sound for exactly 7 seconds. 7 seconds was plenty. I swapped places with a soda can behind them, kicked the needle gun into the air, copied the shock rod in the second attacker's hand, then threw the copy at the third attacker's feet. It burst into blue sparks and glued his shoes to the ground with frost slime. The leader turned. I smiled. He realized the terrified student face had been acting. That was his first mistake. His second mistake was trying to stab me with a hidden blade. I let him. The blade hit my hoodie and bounced off with a sound like a spoon striking a tank. Under the faded cloth, I wore armor made of layered paper shields, goblin leather, storm silk, and 300 copied fish scales from a dungeon carp that had once tried to swallow my foot. It looked stupid. It worked beautifully. The leader froze. I flicked his forehead. He flew backward into a dumpster, so hard the lid clapped shut on him like applause. The other two tried to run. Hyper dropped from a drain pipe, spun through the air, and threw a handful of powder into their faces. It was not poison. I was not trying to kill them. It was sleep dust from moon mushrooms, mixed with crushed pepper because Piper insisted on artistic expression. They sneezed, stumbled, and collapsed into the puddles. The whole fight took 6 seconds. I still had 1 second left. So I used it to pose. Ben emerged from behind the laundromat, holding a camera, and whispered that it looked amazing. Grace stepped out from the pet store roof and told him not to encourage me. The police arrived 3 minutes later because Grace had called them before the ambush even started. The attackers woke up cuffed with their own cuffs, surrounded by officers, while Ben's footage showed exactly who started the fight. The leader shouted that I had trapped them. I agreed. Then I explained that traps are what happen when predators walk into bait without checking for hooks. After that, the black cars disappeared for a while. Not because evil people had learned a moral lesson. Because evil people had learned I filmed in high definition. For a short while, the attacks stopped coming at me directly. Instead, they came sideways. Dungeon Market opened beneath the old subway tunnels, hidden behind a wall of broken vending machines, and a smell so bad even monsters probably apologized to each other inside. Market sold illegal cores, stolen hunter weapons, cursed pets, bottled mana, and fake awakening pills that made people glow for 20 minutes before throwing up rainbows. I heard about it because Piper stole a flyer from a goblin courier. The flyer was written in crooked dungeon symbols, but by then I could read enough to understand the important parts. Secret auction. Rare pocket gate items. Buyers wanted. That last line made my skin crawl. Pocket gate items meant someone else had found tiny gates. Maybe they had farmed them. Maybe they had stolen from people who had. Maybe ordinary students, janitors, kids, or exhausted parents had woken up to blue light under a bed or behind a closet, only to have stronger people take everything from them. I thought about my first night with the economics textbook. I thought about how easy it would have been for someone to kick down my door before I understood anything. So I went shopping. Grace told me not to say it like that. Ben asked if he could come. I said no. He said he could wear a disguise. I said his disguise last time was sunglasses and a hoodie with his own channel logo on it. He accepted that criticism with pain. I entered the market through a maintenance hatch at midnight, wearing a long coat made from shadow cloth and a mask carved from white bone. Hyper rode inside the hood, barely visible except for 2 tiny eyes glowing like angry coins. My weapon was not a sword. Swords were too expected. I carried an umbrella. Black umbrella with a handle made of goblin horn and ribs made of flexible storm bone. Every rib held a copied command strip. When closed, it looked classy. When opened, it became a circular shield, a dart launcher, a glider, a mana amplifier, and if twisted 3 times, a very judgmental spinning saw. The subway wall opened when I fed it 3 black coins. Inside, the tunnel had been transformed into a glowing underground bazaar. Lanterns hung from pipes, stalls leaned against old train cars, tiny monsters haggled beside masked humans. A gray slug wearing jewelry tried to sell me a jar labeled dragon breath, but the jar only contained spicy steam and disappointment. I kept walking. Nobody recognized me at first. That was useful. People recognize power by costume, change the costume, and half of them become blind. At the center of the market, an auction stage had been built on top of an abandoned train platform. Behind glass cages sat small items from pocket gates, bone coins, crystal seeds, clockwork beetles. A baby slime sleeping in a teacup, a cracked skill fragment pulsing red. Then I saw the last cage. Inside was a tiny creature with blue fur, shaking so hard its ears blurred. A collar around its neck drained sparks from its body into a battery. Every time it tried to bite the collar, the battery zapped it. Piper went very still in my hood. That was the scariest version of Piper. The auction began with a man in a silver mask. He bragged about rare goods, secret sources, and how official hunters were too slow to understand the new market. He held up the red skill fragment and said it had come from a bedroom gate. My fingers tightened on the umbrella handle. A buyer asked if more were available. The man said the suppliers were harvesting several homes. The tunnel felt colder. I lifted one hand and placed a bid. Every mask turned toward me. The silver-masked man asked what I was offering. I tossed a black coin onto the platform. Then another. Then 10 more. The crowd murmured. Black coins were dungeon currency, but mine were purer than most because I had farmed them directly. They rang against the platform like drops of midnight. The auctioneer leaned forward. Greed is the easiest monster to predict. It does not dodge, it reaches. He told me to come closer. I did. 2 guards moved behind me. I let them. The auctioneer asked where I got so many coins. I told him from under my bed. He laughed. The guards grabbed my arms. I opened the umbrella. The first command strip flashed. Bounce. The guards flew away from me, crashed into opposite walls, and slid down like wet posters. The second command flashed. Mute. Every alarm rune on the stage died before it could scream. The third command flashed. Unlock. Every cage door opened at once. Chaos exploded. The baby slime in the teacup launched itself onto a buyer's face. The clockwork beetles swarmed across the lights. The blue-furred creature bit through its collar and fired a spark blast into the silver mask, knocking the auctioneer flat. Piper sprang from my hood with a squeal of pure revenge and stabbed 3 control batteries in a row. The crowd panicked. I did not let them escape. Storage shadow spread across the tracks and rose into black walls at every exit. Space Hook grabbed the abandoned train cars and pulled them sideways, blocking tunnels. I copied the umbrella's ribs again and again, sending spinning stormbone arcs through the air. They did not cut flesh. I had adjusted the edges to slap instead. That made it funnier. Masked criminals were lifted off their feet and smacked into snack stalls, piles of fake pills, and one extremely offended jewelry slug. The silver-masked man crawled toward a hidden hatch. I swapped places with a lantern above him and landed in front of his face. He froze. I crouched. He tried to threaten me with suppliers, networks, people too powerful for me to understand. I tapped the bone mask on my face and asked if any of them were hiding under his bed too. He pulled a dagger. Piper bit his wrist. He screamed. I took the dagger, copied it, snapped both copies, and told him that kidnapping tiny dungeon creatures was a bad business model. When Grace's hunter unit stormed the market, they found the exits sealed, the criminals tied in storm silk, the illegal goods neatly sorted by danger level, and me feeding crumbs to the rescued slime. Grace stared at the wreckage. She asked how one undercover visit became a full market collapse. I said there was a sale. She said that explained nothing. Ben was furious he missed it. So I gave him the jewelry slug interview footage. It became his most viewed video for a week. The blue-furred creature refused to leave Piper's side until morning. I named nothing, because naming every weird creature that followed me would turn my apartment into a daycare with fangs. But I did give it a sock to sleep in and a bowl of cereal. It bowed to Piper like Piper had become royalty. Piper accepted this immediately and spent the next day walking around my room like a tiny dictator. The market raid taught me something important. The world was bigger than giant gates and celebrity hunters. There was a hidden layer underneath everything: small gates, small monsters, small crimes, small people getting crushed because nobody famous noticed. I had been small once. That made it personal. So I started building something that was not a guild, because guilds had logos and meeting rooms and people who said synergy with straight faces. I built a route. Every night after farming my own gate, I followed the pulses I could feel through gate sense's weaker echoes. At that point I did not have the full skill yet, not like later, but my mark, my coins, and the dungeon mud on my shoes helped me sniff out tiny cracks in reality: a closet in a closed laundromat, janitor's supply room at campus, a sewer pipe behind a bakery, a vending machine that only accepted black coins and screamed if you pressed grape soda. Not all of them were dangerous. Some pocket gates were quiet little rooms with strange plants and sleepy creatures. Some dropped coins once a week like reality had loose change. Some contained angry things trapped behind doors too small to escape. But a few had already been found by people with knives and no patience. Those were the ones I visited first. One night I found two smugglers trying to drag a crystal deer out of a gate behind a laundromat. The deer was the size of a dog, covered in shining branches and crying gemstones onto the floor. The smugglers had nets made of heated wire. I stepped through the dryer vent behind them. That sentence made perfect sense in my life now. They turned, saw a guy crawling out of a dryer with a frying pan, and laughed. I loved when they laughed first. It saved me the trouble of feeling bad. The first smuggler swung a net. I ducked, slapped the net with the frying pan, and used copy hand. The copied net wrapped around him instead, but mine had been modified with frost slime, so it instantly became a human-sized ice burrito. The second smuggler pulled a fire gem. I tossed a wet sock onto it. The gem hissed and died. He stared at the sock like I had broken a law of nature. I told him laundry beats arson. Then the crystal deer head-butted him into a dryer. The police found them spinning slowly on delicate cycle because Piper had pressed the button. Another night, I found a pocket gate inside an arcade cabinet. Anyone who beat level 9 of an old monster game got their shadow pulled into a tiny dungeon and forced to fight pixel skeletons for coins. The owner had figured it out and was charging people to play, pretending it was a new virtual experience while their shadows came back bruised. I waited until he tried to show off. Then I challenged the cabinet. The screen flashed, my shadow got pulled in. The owner smiled. He did not realize my shadow had teeth. Storage shadow opened inside the arcade game like a black ocean. Pixel skeletons poured toward me in glowing squares. I grabbed a joystick from the real world, copied it, and used both like short clubs. Every skeleton I broke dropped little square coins that made cheerful ding sounds. When the boss appeared, a giant pixel dragon made of red blocks, I used Space Hook on its own health bar. The bar ripped off the top of the screen. The dragon looked up in confusion. I hit it with its health bar until the game crashed. When my shadow snapped back into place, every rigged cabinet in the arcade spat out coins, tickets, and one confused goblin wearing headphones. The owner tried to run. The claw machine grabbed him by the belt and lifted him into the air. I had upgraded it 5 minutes earlier. Sometimes justice has a metal claw and terrible aim. The kids who had been tricked got their shadows healed with moon herb smoke. The arcade shut down. Ben begged me for permission to release the footage, but Grace said showing people how to find an arcade gate was a terrible idea. Ben said he could blur the cabinet. Grace said he once blurred Piper and left Piper's knife perfectly visible. Ben had no defense. The next pocket gate was worse. It was inside a storage unit rented by a group of illegal hunters who had no interest in tiny creatures or coins. They were using it to test weapons on trapped monsters. When I arrived, the air smelled like burnt metal and fear. Cages lined the walls. Little dungeon beasts huddled together, some injured, some too tired to hiss. The hunters were testing a cannon built from stolen cores. They fired it at a stone turtle until its shell cracked. My vision went narrow. There is a difference between fighting monsters that attack people and hurting things because they cannot stop you. One is survival. The other is being trash with better equipment. I walked in through the front door. No mask, no trick entrance, no joke. The hunters raised their weapons. Their leader, a broad man with tattoos crawling up his neck, said I had picked the wrong place. I looked at the cracked turtle. I told him no, I had picked the right one. They fired. A cannon blast screamed across the unit, a beam of red mana meant to punch through armor. I opened the umbrella. Reflect. Beam bent upward, carved through the ceiling, and launched into the night sky like a flare. Every hunter in the unit froze. I closed the umbrella. Then I moved. I did not use my strongest attacks. I used humiliating ones. A copied mop handle swept legs, slime beads glued hands to weapons, paper commands labeled trip attached to their boots. One hunter tried to summon fire, so I swapped his fire gem with a boiled potato from Storage Shadow. He shouted a spell and produced mashed potato steam. Piper appeared on the cannon, jammed a bone coin into the barrel, and gave me a thumbs up. I ducked. The cannon exploded into a cloud of glittering dust and embarrassment. When it was over, the hunters were stacked in a pile, tied with their own testing cables. The stone turtle crawled over and sat on the leader's chest. It weighed about 200 pounds. The leader wheezed. I told him to apologize. He did. The turtle sneezed dust in his face anyway. Grace arrived with officers and animal handlers, though nobody knew whether dungeon creatures counted as animals. She looked tired before she even saw me. I told her I had used proportional force. She looked at the potato stuck in the wall. I said mostly proportional. Rescued creatures did not all survive, and that stayed with me. Power could do ridiculous things. It could duplicate weapons, bend space, turn trash into traps, and make criminals look like clowns. But power could not rewind cruelty after it happened. So I got faster. I trained until sleep became something I negotiated with rather than enjoyed. Classes blurred. Work shifts became unnecessary after the rewards from Legal Gate clears finally paid my rent for a year. But I kept showing up at the convenience store for 2 more weeks just to prove to myself that I could leave on my own terms. My last night, a drunk customer recognized me and asked why an SSS hunter was restocking chips. I told him the barbecue flavor was unguarded. He nodded like that was wise. By then, my room had changed. Mattress still sagged, the floor still creaked, the window still stuck if I opened it too far, but every wall had hidden shelves folded into shadow space. Monster bones hung like wind chimes, herbs grew in jars. Coins sorted themselves in little piles because I trained beetles to organize them by size. My frying pan rested above the desk in a place of honor, beside the umbrella and a row of copied daggers. Under the bed, the gate spun quietly. It had become less like a threat and more like a furnace. Every night I fed it courage and bad decisions. Every morning it gave me power. Deep floors started changing my body in strange ways, not because the dungeon reacted to me, but because I kept dragging pieces of it back into myself. My hearing sharpened until I could hear a coin fall in the apartment upstairs. My eyes adjusted to darkness so well that turning on lights felt rude. My bones grew denser. My reflexes became fast enough that once, when Ben dropped his phone, I caught it, copied the case, edited the copy into a stand, and placed both on the table before he finished gasping. He asked if I could do that with homework. I said yes. Then I didn't. Power has lines. Mine were strange, but they existed. I would duplicate dungeon loot, weapons, medicine, shields, tools, and occasionally snacks during emergencies. I would not duplicate exam answers or money from normal banks. That felt like cheating in a way that would make my mother disappointed from wherever tired parents go when their kids become chaos goblins with rent money. Black coins were different. Black coins had tried to bite me first. I considered them fair game. My fame kept growing, but I treated it like a monster too. Feed it too much and it becomes bigger than you. Starve it completely and other people decide its shape, so I gave the city just enough. Ben posted edited recaps of public gate clears. Never my bedroom, never the pocket route, never the faces of rescued people who had not asked to become content. Grace handled official statements. I handled the part where monsters met household objects at high speed. The city started calling me the Bedgate Hunter. I hated it. Piper loved it. Ben printed a sticker. Grace confiscated the sticker. For a while, the nickname made people underestimate me in a new way. They expected comedy. They expected a weird guy with tricks. They forgot that tricks become terrifying when the person using them can punch through concrete. That mistake saved lives during the mall incident. It happened on a Saturday afternoon when I was buying socks because Piper had turned most of mine into nests for rescued spark mice. The mall was crowded, loud, and full of smells that made my dungeon-trained senses beg for mercy. I was standing in line at a pretzel stand when every electronic screen flickered blue. A gate opened inside the central fountain. Not a tiny gate. A real one. People screamed as the water rose upward instead of falling, twisting into a spiral. The fountain cracked. Something huge pressed against reality from the other side. Official alarms wailed. Hunters would take minutes to arrive. The first monster took seconds. It burst through the water like a crocodile made of stained glass, long jaws snapping, body refracting light into knives. Then another came, then 5. They slid across the polished floor, cutting through benches and kiosks just by turning their heads. I had no armor, no umbrella, no prepared paper commands. I had a bag of socks, a pretzel, and Piper, who had been hiding inside my hood because security did not allow tiny dagger creatures in retail spaces. The nearest glass crocodile lunged at a child. I threw the pretzel. It hit the monster in the eye. The monster paused, deeply offended. That gave me half a second. Half a second was plenty. I snapped my fingers and opened storage shadow under the sock bag. Sock spilled into darkness and came out changed, soaked in frost slime, stiffened with dungeon thread, marked with tiny commands I carved using my thumbnail and mana. I flung them like throwing knives. The sock slapped onto crocodile jaws. Phrase, clamp, trip. 3 monsters face-planted into the floor, sliding across the mall until they crashed into a perfume store and created a smell so powerful it briefly stunned everyone, including me. The huge thing behind the gate pushed harder. A crystal eye the size of a car appeared in the water spiral. I needed time. I jumped onto the fountain edge and shouted for everyone to get low. Most people listened because I was glowing, and glowing people usually have opinions worth hearing during disasters. A glass crocodile whipped its tail at me. I swapped with the pretzel bag in my other hand. The tail sliced through the bag instead, launching pretzel bites into the air like salty confetti. Piper leaped from my hood, bounced off a kiosk sign, and landed on a crocodile's snout. It stabbed both eyes with toothpicks, backflipped, and squeaked like a champion. The crowd cheered. Piper bowed. Another monster nearly ate Piper during the bow, so I slapped it with a frozen sock and told Piper to respect timing. The boss pushed through. It was a fountain serpent, enormous and beautiful, made of transparent scales filled with moving water. Its antlers scraped the skylight, its mouth opened, and a pressure beam formed between its teeth. If it fired, the beam would cut through 3 floors of civilians. I had no weapon big enough, so I used them all. Space Hook latched onto every loose metal object I could feel. Kiosk frames, escalator panels, chair legs, coin machines, the fountain's own broken pipes. I pulled them inward, spinning around the serpent's head. Then I opened storage shadow and dumped out every copied sock, rope, wire, and storm silk net I had. It was not elegant. It looked like the world's angriest laundry basket had achieved enlightenment. The serpent fired. I yanked the metal storm into the beam's path. Water pressure hit steel, bent sideways, and blasted through the skylight instead. Rain from the shattered fountain fell upward into the open sky. I jumped. Copy hand flashed on a falling escalator step. 1 became 2, 2 became 4, 4 became 8. I kicked off each one midair like stairs I was building beneath my own feet. The serpent tried to follow my movement, but Space Hook tied its antlers to the mall's support beams with storm silk. I reached its head. For one breath, I saw my reflection in its crystal eye. I looked ridiculous. Wet hoodie, sock bag in one hand, pretzel salt on my cheek, tiny creature screaming from below. Then I punched the serpent between the eyes. The first punch cracked the scale. The second punch drove frost slime into the crack. The third punch activated store. Not storage shadow. Store. It was a smaller trick I had been testing. Anything small enough and weakened enough could be folded into shadow space temporarily, usually rocks, daggers, slime jars. A serpent head was not small, but its core was. My hand plunged through the cracked scale, grabbed the cold core inside, and folded it into shadow space. The serpent's body collapsed into harmless fountain water all at once. The gate flickered. The glass crocodiles shattered. The mall went silent except for the alarms, the rain, and one pretzel worker whispering that I still owed for the pretzel. I paid double. Ben arrived after the fight, out of breath and furious. He had missed another historic disaster. Then he saw the security footage. He forgave the universe. The mall incident changed my image again. Comedy became awe, awe became fear. Fear became worship from some people, which was worse than mockery in its own way. Mockery pushes you down. Worship tries to freeze you in place. People started waiting outside my apartment with gifts. Some asked me to bless their weapons. Some wanted selfies. Some cried. Some asked if I could awaken them. I could not. I could teach someone to swing a pan at a goblin, but I could not open a gate in their soul. One evening, a kid left a note under my door saying he wanted to become strong because everyone at school treated him like trash. I sat with that note for a long time. Then I wrote back. I told him strength is not becoming the person everyone fears. Strength is becoming someone who does not have to beg cruel people for permission to breathe. I told him to train, study, ask for help, and never confuse being alone with being worthless. Then I added that frying pans were underrated. I did not sign it as the SSS Hunter. I signed it as Tyler. The next threat came through Ben. That made it personal in a different way. He called me one night with his voice too calm, which was how I knew something was wrong. Ben was many things: hungry, loud, dramatic, allergic to silence. Calm was not one of them. He said someone had invited him to preview leaked footage of a hidden gate operation. He thought it was a tip. He went to a studio space downtown. When he arrived, the doors locked behind him, and a voice told him to call me. I was already moving before he finished. Grace wanted to send a team. I told her to send them, but slowly. She understood. The studio was on the 5th floor of an empty building with black windows and too many exits. The kidnappers had chosen it well. There were mana mines on the stairwell, cameras in the vents, and a barrier across the elevator shaft. They expected me to rush. That was rude. I am many things, but I do not rush into obvious traps unless I have already made the trap worse for the people who built it. I entered through the building next door. Then I used space hook on a vending machine from the lobby, pulled it up 5 floors through the stairwell, and let it crash through the wall of the studio beside Ben. The kidnappers were so surprised they forgot to threaten him for 3 whole seconds. Ben was tied to a chair in the center of the room, surrounded by 6 masked attackers and 1 heavy mana device pulsing on the floor. He saw the vending machine, saw me crouched on top of it, and said he knew I would make an entrance. I told him snacks were included. The attackers recovered and fired binding chains. I swapped with a candy bar inside the vending machine. The chains wrapped the vending machine instead. Then I copied every candy bar inside it. Hundreds of wrapped chocolates burst outward in a storm of cheap sugar. It sounds dumb until you understand that each one carried a tiny paper command. Stick, smoke, flash, trip. The room became a carnival disaster. Attackers slipped on chocolate, coughed in smoke, grabbed at flashing wrappers, and stepped into their own binding chains. One tried to activate the mana device. Piper crawled out of the coin slot and slapped his hand away with a tiny wrench. The device pulsed brighter. It was not a bomb. It was worse. A gate anchor. The kidnappers were trying to force my secret by making a pocket gate open in the studio. They had gathered fragments from stolen gates and tied them together like broken teeth. If the anchor stabilized, it would rip a tiny gate open, whether the building could survive it or not. Ben's chair sat directly on top. For the first time in a while, I felt real fear. Not for myself. For the person who had believed in me when I was still a broke student with noodle breath and goblin scratches. The masked leader laughed and said if I wanted to save my friend, I had to show them how I controlled pocket gates. I looked at Ben. He looked scared, but he still raised his eyebrows like he knew I had something ridiculous ready. I did, but it was very stupid. I pulled the fountain serpent core from storage shadow. It was unstable, cold, and still angry. Grace had told me not to use it indoors. Grace was not there yet. I slammed the serpent core into the gate anchor. 2 unstable dimensional objects met each other and immediately decided to argue. The room folded sideways. For 1 second, the floor was the ceiling was a wall, and one attacker's shoes briefly became emotionally attached to a lamp. The anchor's forming gate twisted into a ring of water. The serpent core tried to expand. I shoved both hands into the mana storm and used copy hand on the anchor's stabilizing bolts. Bolts duplicated everywhere. Too many bolts. The anchor locked itself down so hard it could no longer open. Then I used space hook on Ben's chair and yanked him across the room, ropes and all. He slid between 2 attackers, knocked one over, and crashed into my arms. I cut him loose with a bone shard. He asked if the snack storm was sponsored. I said not yet. The kidnappers tried to flee. They had forgotten the vending machine. I lifted it with space hook and sent it rolling after them like a square metal boulder. It bounced down the hallway, firing copied candy bars from the broken glass front. Each candy bar exploded into frost slime on impact. By the time Grace's team arrived, the attackers were frozen to the walls, the mana anchor was sealed inside a bubble of water, and Ben was filming himself eating a rescued chocolate bar with shaking hands. Later on the roof, he admitted he had been terrified. I told him I was too. He asked why I still joked during fights. I looked down at the city lights, at the roads and apartments and windows where ordinary people were living ordinary nights, not knowing how many strange doors might be humming near them. I told him jokes gave fear something smaller to wear. He said that sounded deep. I said I had just made it up. He said he was posting it. Grace arrived behind us and told him he absolutely was not posting anything from a kidnapping scene. He hid the camera like a guilty squirrel. After Ben's kidnapping, I stopped treating the hidden market as a side problem. The stolen pocket gate fragments had to come from somewhere. Someone was mapping tiny gates, harvesting them, and selling pieces to criminals who thought reality was a toy. I followed the trail through scraps, coins, and the smell of burnt cinnamon. That smell mattered. When my gate disliked being moved, it gave off burnt cinnamon. When the studio anchor activated, the same smell filled the room. When I checked the broken cages from the subway market, I found the scent on the locks. Not strong, but there. A supplier had a method for forcing pocket gate energy out of its place. I hated that. The trail led to an old indoor water park on the edge of the city, closed years ago, after a gate incident flooded half the building with glowing algae. Now the slide stood dry and cracked under a sagging glass dome. The lazy river had become a ring of black mud. Mold crawled over cartoon fish painted on the walls. It would have been creepy even without the mana pulses. With them, it felt like walking into a monster's open mouth. Grace wanted to bring a full unit. I said we needed stealth first. She said my idea of stealth involved vending machines and property damage. I said that was one time. Ben coughed. I corrected myself. Several times. The point was we needed proof, not because of paperwork, not because of legal games, but because hidden criminals scatter when they smell danger. If we charged in too early, the people at the top would vanish and find another place to hurt smaller targets. So I went in alone. Except for Piper, which counted as being alone with a knife gremlin. Water park's front doors were chained, but chains are just metal suggestions. I slipped through a broken side window and dropped into the lobby. The air was wet and cold. Every step made old puddles ripple. Somewhere deeper in the building, machinery hummed. I followed the smell. Past changing rooms. Past broken lockers. Past a snack bar where the menu still advertised pizza, so faded it looked haunted. Then I reached the wave pool. The pool had been drained, leaving a huge concrete basin. At the bottom, dozens of tiny gates had been pinned to the floor like glowing insects. Metal rings held them open. Tubes pulled energy from each one into a tower of glass tanks. Inside the tanks floated fragments, cores, and sleeping creatures. My hands curled. Workers moved between machines, masked and quiet. Armed guards patrolled the upper railings. At the far end of the pool, a large gate fragment pulsed inside a cage of black metal. It was not stable enough to open fully, but it fed on the little gates below, growing brighter with every beat. They were making a bigger gate out of smaller ones. Not a system reaction, not some cosmic punishment. Just human greed with tools. That almost made it worse. I was about to move when Piper grabbed my ear and pointed. Near the center of the pool, strapped to a metal table, was the crystal deer from the laundromat. Its branches were dull. A tube drained light from its chest. The world went quiet again. I breathed once. Then I smiled. Not because I was happy. Because anger without a plan is just noise, and I had a beautiful plan. First, I opened storage shadow under a pile of old pool noodles near the shallow end. I had collected them on the way in because I respect local materials. I marked each noodle with commands using mana, then copied them until shadow space was stuffed with foam cylinders. Second, I released 3 dungeon beetles carrying Ben's micro cameras. They crawled along pipes and railings, recording every machine, every face, every trapped gate. Third, I waited until the workers began transferring energy into the big fragment. Timing matters. You do not kick a villain's sandcastle before they finish building it. You wait until they put the flag on top. Then you turn the beach into a trampoline. The big fragment flashed. I dropped into the empty wave pool. One guard shouted. I raised both hands. The first 100 pool noodles erupted from storage shadow. Every guard paused. That was fair, nobody expects pool noodles. Then the commands activated. Stretch, bounce, bind. Noodles shot across the basin like colorful snakes, wrapping ankles, wrists, weapons, railings, machines. A guard fired a mana rifle. The shot hit a noodle, bounced, hit a slide, bounced again, and knocked his own helmet off. Piper dropped onto the control panel and began chewing wires. The wave pool machines roared awake. Black mud surged into the basin. The workers screamed as the mud lifted them off their feet and carried them in slow circles. I had not planned that part, but I appreciated the drama. I sprinted toward the crystal deer. 2 guards blocked me with shock spears. I slid between them, hooked one spear with space hook, and made the 2 weapons cross. Their electricity met in the middle and blasted both guards backward into a stack of pool noodles. The noodles hugged them. Aggressively, the leader of the operation appeared on the upper platform. No name. He did not deserve one. He wore a white coat over hunter gear and held a control rod connected to the big fragment. He looked less like a warrior and more like a man who thought calling cruelty research made it cleaner. He told me to stop or the trapped gates would collapse. I believed him. That was why I had already copied the stabilizer rings. Copy hand flashed through the pool floor. 1 ring became 2 around each gate. 2 became 4. The machine screamed as duplicated rings took over the strain. The tiny gate stopped shaking. The white-coated leader stared. I waved. He tried to overload the big fragment. I threw a pool noodle at him. He sneered and cut it in half with a mana blade. Both halves kept flying. One wrapped his wrist. The other slapped the control rod out of his hand. Never underestimate cheap foam. I reached the crystal deer, cut the tube, and poured moon herb smoke over the wound. Light returned to its branches in weak pulses. The deer tried to stand. I told it to rest. It headbutted me gently instead. There. Behind me, the big fragment cracked. The white-coated leader had a backup rod. Of course he did. He slammed it into the platform, and the fragment opened just enough for something inside to notice us. A hand emerged. Long fingers, black claws, skin like wet stone. Then a head pushed through, blind and smiling. Not a reflection creature, not a copy, something older and meaner, a gate eater, a creature that fed on unstable openings. The criminals had not summoned it on purpose. They had created a buffet and forgotten something might come hungry. The gate eater squeezed through the fragment, stretching the crack wider. Every tiny gate in the pool flickered as it began pulling them toward its mouth. The white-coated leader turned pale. I looked up at him and said his science project was biting back. Then I ran at the monster. The gate eater moved wrong, its body folded around attacks, space bent near its claws. When it swiped, it did not cut through air. It removed the space where air had been. A chunk of concrete vanished beside me with no sound. That was new. Cool. Terrible but cool. I threw daggers, it ate the space around them. I launched frost socks. It swallowed the cold. I used space hook on its arm, but the hook snapped as the monster chewed through the connection. For the first time, space hook failed completely. The gate eater opened its mouth, and every tiny gate in the pool stretched toward it. I needed another angle. Not force. Annoyance. I opened storage shadow and released the jewelry slug. Yes, I had kept it. No, I do not know why. The slug landed in front of the gate eater, covered in bracelets and terrible confidence. It released a cloud of glittering stink, so powerful the air turned visible. The gate eater recoiled. It could eat space. It could not handle smell. Beautiful. I used that second to grab the stabilizer rings with space hook, not the monster. The rings were connected to every tiny gate. I yanked them upward, pulling the gates out of the monster's feeding angle. The gate eater lunged after them. That was what I wanted. I opened the umbrella, planted it in the pool floor, and activated every rib. Bounce, reflect, clamp, spin. The umbrella expanded into a stormbone wheel. The gate eater crashed into it mouth first. Its own feeding pull bounced back, not fully, but enough. For one impossible second, the monster tried to eat its own hunger. It froze. I jumped onto its head. Piper tossed me the white-coated leader's backup rod. I drove the rod into the crack in the big fragment and used copy hand. 1 rod became 2. 2 became 4. 4 became a cage of rods around the fragment, each one reversing the drain. Energy surged back into the tiny gates. The big fragment shrank. The gate eater screamed without sound as the opening closed around its neck. It tried to pull free. I looked at the trapped creatures, the drained deer, the pinned little doors. Then I punched the fragment. The gate snapped shut. The gate eater's body dissolved into black sand. The wave pool went dark. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then every freed tiny gate released one little burst of light. the whole basin filled with sparks. It looked like stars rising from a dirty pool. Grace's unit arrived moments later, guided by Ben's camera feed. The criminals were still being dragged around by pool noodles in the mud. The white-coated leader tried to crawl away through the snack bar. The crystal deer blocked him. Its branches glowed. He backed up. Piper stood behind him, holding a broken control rod like a spear. He sat down and waited for arrest. Smartest thing he did all night. After the water park, nobody could pretend the hidden pocket gate trade was rumor. Ben's footage went public, edited carefully, with faces blurred where needed and monsters protected when possible. People saw the tiny gates pinned to the floor. They saw the cages. They saw me beating a space-eating monster with an umbrella, a jewelry slug, and pool noodles. The city reacted in waves. Fear first, then outrage, then memes. Always memes. For 2 days, every video online had someone swinging a pool noodle at their closet and yelling that they were ready to awaken. Grace hated it. I pretended to hate it. Piper demanded a pool noodle weapon. I made one. It squeaked when it hit things. Terrifying. The official hunter world did not know what to do with me anymore. I had cleared giant gates, exposed hidden markets, rescued civilians, and destroyed an illegal operation nobody else had even found. I still refused to join any guild. I still lived in the same apartment. I still answered Ben's calls and still ate convenience store sandwiches when I forgot groceries existed. They invited me to a public ranking demonstration. I almost ignored it. Then Grace explained that if I did not show up, every arrogant hunter in the region would keep challenging me in parking lots, gym lobbies, and once, apparently, a dentist office. I asked why a dentist office. She said the challenger had a wisdom tooth appointment and poor timing. So I went. The demonstration took place inside a training arena built for high-rank hunters, reinforced walls, mana barriers, floating cameras, thousands of spectators. It was supposed to measure power through controlled tests, which meant punching targets, dodging drones, lifting enchanted weights. Letting officials pretend numbers could explain a person who had once defeated a gate boss using cafeteria trays. I arrived in a plain hoodie. The crowd murmured. Some laughed. Not like before, more nervous now. A few famous hunters stood near the front, arms crossed, faces sharp with the expression people wear when they desperately want reality to prove them special again. One of them, a lightning-type celebrity with perfect hair, stepped forward and said he wanted to spar. Grace pinched the bridge of her nose. Ben whispered from behind his camera that perfect hair was about to become historical footage. The officials tried to refuse. I accepted, not because I cared about proving myself to the lightning hunter. Because I saw the way younger hunters watched him, the way they copied his sneer, the way they looked at my hoodie and thought maybe power still had a uniform. Some lessons need an audience. The sparring field activated, mana barriers rose, the lightning hunter summoned a spear of electricity and smiled for the cameras. He told me not to blink. I blinked. On purpose. He vanished in a flash and appeared behind me, spear aimed at my back. Fast. Not fast enough. I swapped with a loose thread on my hoodie and appeared behind him instead. He stabbed empty air. The crowd gasped. I tapped his shoulder. He spun furious and unleashed a storm of lightning bolts. I opened a paper fan. The fan had been made from layered shield paper and storm silk, folded by Piper, who had terrible handwriting but excellent violence instincts. Each bolt hit the fan and curved around me into the ground. The lightning hunter stared. I asked if he had another setting. He rushed me faster than before. His body became a streak of blue. He attacked from 8 angles in 2 seconds, spear thrusts blurring, electricity cracking across the arena. I did not block with strength. I used rhythm. Every fighter has habits, even flashy ones, especially flashy ones. He liked appearing on the left after a high feint. He shifted his shoulder before a low strike. He breathed out before using his strongest burst. After 10 exchanges, I knew his dance. After 11, I changed the music. I dropped black coins across the floor with each step. He ignored them. Everyone ignores coins until they become a map. Space hook connected coin to coin, thread to thread, spark to spark. The arena floor became a web only I could feel. When he dashed again, I pulled 1 coin half an inch. His footing shifted. That was enough. I opened storage shadow and released 1 pool noodle. It hit him in the face. The crowd went silent, then laughed. He roared and charged with every ounce of lightning he had. I stood still. At the last second, I swapped with the pool noodle stuck to his chest. He found himself charging toward the barrier. I found myself behind him. I gently pushed. He hit the barrier face first and slid down with his perfect hair smoking. The spar ended. I offered him a hand. He did not take it at first. Then he looked at the crowd, at the younger hunters, at the cameras, and maybe at the shape of his own pride lying cracked on the floor. He took my hand. I pulled him up. He muttered that I fought like a lunatic. I told him it worked. Ranking officials moved me to the final power test after that. The machine was a tower of crystal plates designed to measure output. Most hunters struck it once. The plates lit up to show rank. Low rank lit 1 or 2 plates. High rank lit dozens. S-Rank could light the whole tower. They told me to hit it with full power. I asked if they were sure. They said the arena was reinforced. Grace, standing behind them, said my name in the tone people use when they see a toddler holding fireworks. I promised to be careful. Then I put one finger against the crystal tower. Instead of punching, I used copy hand on a single spark of mana inside my fingertip. 1 spark became 2. 2 became 4. 4 became a flood, controlled, folded, layered through storage shadow, bounced through the umbrella ribs hidden under my sleeve, condensed through the fountain serpent core, and filtered through black coins spinning in my palm. The crystal plates lit 1 by 1. 10, 20, 50, 100. The tower ran out of plates. Then the base lit up. Then the floor. Then the barrier. The arena screens flashed error messages so quickly they looked like confetti. I stopped before anything broke. Mostly. A tiny crack ran down the crystal tower. A puff of smoke came out the top. The official holding the tablet whispered that the reading exceeded SSS threshold. I asked if there was a higher box to check. He looked like I had insulted math. The crowd did not cheer at first. They just stared. That was the moment the world finally understood that the poor student with the gate under his bed had not climbed into their ranking system. I had climbed out of it. Then Piper, who had been hiding in my hood, lifted the squeaky pool noodle weapon and saluted the cameras. The arena exploded with noise. After that, the challenges stopped. The invitations became polite. The insults became whispers. And the evil people, the ones still hiding in the corners of the hidden trade, changed tactics again. They stopped trying to capture me. They tried to copy my results. Not with enemies who copied my face, not with magic duplicates, with desperation. People began forcing themselves into tiny gates they were not ready for. Wannabe hunters crawled under floors, broke into basements, shoved hands into glowing cracks, and chased black coins without understanding that my first coin had come after I smashed a monster with a textbook and nearly died of stupidity. Videos spread dangerous advice, fake rituals, people claiming they could open pocket gates with salt, candles, and shouting at furniture. Ben showed me the clips with a grim face. I watched a teenager try to stick a kitchen knife into a glowing wall crack while friends laughed behind him. The crack bit the knife in half. I told Ben to turn it off. Fame had become another gate. Things were crawling out of it. So I made a public video. No effects, no jokes, no monster footage. Just me sitting on the floor of my apartment, the bed behind me but the gate hidden by shadow cloth. I told people not to chase secret gates. I told them pocket gates were not toys, not shortcuts, not vending machines for power. I told them that I had survived because I was lucky, stubborn, and increasingly surrounded by people who pulled me back when I went too far. Then I held up the old economics textbook. The cover was still dented from the first goblin. I told them this was my first weapon. Not a legendary sword. Not a bloodline. Not destiny. A cheap textbook and panic. I said if they wanted strength, they should train safely, report dangerous gates, protect weaker people, and stop letting strangers online turn their lives into bait. Ben posted it. For once, the internet mostly listened. Mostly. There are always idiots. 3 nights later, one of those idiots became a problem. A group of thrill-seekers broke into an abandoned hotel, rumored to have a pocket gate in the basement laundry room. They live-streamed it. They laughed, dared each other, and ignored every warning sign, including the one that said danger, unstable floor, which was not magical but still deserved respect. The pocket gate opened inside an industrial washing machine. At first, nothing happened. Then the machine began filling with red sand. The live stream comments went wild. Then the sand formed hands. I saw the clip because Ben called me halfway through brushing my teeth. I arrived with toothpaste still on my sleeve. The hotel basement was already sinking into a small desert pocket. Red sand poured from washing machines, dryers, vents, and cracks in the tile. The thrill seekers had climbed onto laundry tables, screaming while sand hands grabbed at their ankles. At the center, the washing machine gate spun faster, pulling the basement inward. This was not a boss fight yet. It was a rescue with a timer. I jumped down the stairs, opened storage shadow, and released every empty jar I owned. Copy hand turned 12 jars into hundreds. Space hook flung them into the sand, each jar marked drink. The jars swallowed sand like greedy mouths. It bought me space. Hyper sprinted across clotheslines, cutting people free from sand ropes. I threw frost socks again, because apparently socks had become a core part of my combat style, and froze the sand hands long enough for people to escape. One thrill seeker kept filming. I took his phone, tossed it into storage shadow, and told him his survival could be posted later. He looked offended. A sand giant rose from the washing machine, wearing a crown made of dryer lint and broken buttons. I respected the fashion. Then it punched me through a wall. I crashed into the next room, rolled through a pile of old towels, and came up laughing because its fist had been made of sand, and sand was just tiny rocks with confidence. I could work with that. The giant stomped after me. I grabbed a towel, marked it twist, copied it 50 times, and sent the towels spinning around the giant's legs. They tightened, soaked with frost slime, then hardened. The giant stumbled. I hooked the washing machines with space hook and yanked them into a circle around it. Then I activated spin. Every machine roared to life. The sand giant was trapped inside the world's most violent laundry cycle. Red sand flew everywhere, buttons shot like bullets, dryer sheets became flags of war. Piper rode a spinning towel around the giant's head, squealing with delight. When the giant's core appeared, a red pearl rolling inside its chest, I swapped with a button stuck near it, snatched the pearl, and folded it into storage shadow. The giant collapsed into a clean pile of warm sand. The washing machine gate shrank to the size of a drain and closed with a sad beep. The thrill seekers survived. They also got arrested for breaking into the hotel, which I considered a balanced educational ending. The one who had kept filming asked if I would give his phone back. I did, after deleting the part where he ignored the warnings. He protested. I told him reality had already given him a warning, and he had swiped past it. The hotel incident proved the public warning helped, but not enough. People needed examples of what to do when they found a tiny gate, not just what not to do. So Grace, Ben, and I created a simple guide. No secrets about farming, no instructions for entering. Just how to recognize danger, how to back away, how to call for help, how to keep pets and kids from touching glowing holes in reality. Ben made it exciting. Grace made it accurate. I made it weird enough people remembered it. Rule 1, do not feed the gate. Rule 2, do not insult the gate. Rule 3, if a tiny claw comes out, do not negotiate. Use a chair and retreat. Rule 4, if a small creature looks scared instead of violent, do not become the monster in its story. That last rule mattered most to me. Because the more I explored, the more I realized pocket gates were not all invasions. Some were accidents, some were nests. Some were little bridges between places that had no idea humans existed until humans started poking them with sticks. The giant gates still brought disasters. But the tiny ones were complicated. Like people, and complicated things could be exploited by anyone cruel enough to simplify them into profit. The last major hit against the hidden trade came from a place I never expected. My old campus. The same school where I had walked half asleep, hungry, ignored, and carrying goblin scratches under my sleeves. A pocket gate opened inside the maintenance tunnels beneath the library. It had probably been there for months, maybe longer, hidden behind old pipes and dust. A group of students found it while looking for a shortcut during a storm. One of them dropped a flashlight inside. Something threw the flashlight back. They reported it. Good. Then someone else heard about it. Bad. By the time Grace called me, the campus was locked down, not because monsters had escaped, because masked thieves had entered the tunnels first and taken hostages. They wanted the gate's core and any items inside. They thought a campus gate would be easy. That mistake felt personal. I arrived through the roof because front entrances are for people with patience. Rain hammered the library skylights. Police lights flashed across wet stone. Students huddled behind barricades, whispering when they saw me. I recognized that look. Hope mixed with fear. heavy thing to carry. I entered the library alone. The inside smelled like paper, dust, and stormwater. Emergency lights painted the shelves red. Somewhere below, a hostage cried out. The old me would have frozen. The new me still felt fear, but fear had become fuel instead of chains. I slipped into the basement and found the maintenance door blown open. Beyond it, tunnels stretched under campus, lined with pipes and cables. The pocket gate glowed at the far end, small and green, set into the wall like a sleepy eye. Around it stood the thieves, 5 of them, with hostages kneeling nearby. No named villains. No grand speeches. Just cowards with weapons near scared people. The leader held a blade to a student's throat and told me to step out where he could see me. I did. Hands raised. Old hoodie soaked from the rain. No visible weapon. He said even I could not move faster than a knife. He was right. So I did not move. I moved the floor. Earlier, while walking through the tunnel, I had dropped black coins into puddles. Space Hook connected them in a web beneath the thieves. When the leader threatened the student, I pulled every coin at once. The puddles jumped. Not splashed, jumped. Thin sheets of water rose around each hostage like clear shields. At the same time, the floor under the thieves tilted half an inch. Half an inch is nothing unless you are holding a hostage and expecting the world to stay still. The blade slipped away from the student's throat. I swapped with a coin behind the leader. My elbow hit his ribs. The knife flew. Piper caught it midair, rode it down like a surfboard, and kicked the handle into a drain. The other thieves fired. Water shields caught the shots. Paper commands hidden inside library index cards floated from my sleeves and slapped onto the thieves' weapons. Rust. Jam. Drop. One rifle turned orange and fell apart. One pistol clicked uselessly. One shock baton dropped itself down the thief's pants. He danced. I pretended not to enjoy it. The hostages crawled behind the water shields. I opened storage shadow and released a line of copied library carts. They rolled on their own, forming a moving barricade that carried the students back toward the basement door. The leader recovered and grabbed a gate extractor from his bag. The device unfolded like a metal spider and stabbed its legs into the green pocket gate. The gate screamed. Not with sound, with pressure. Every light in the tunnel burst. The walls shook, books fell somewhere above us like rain. I lunged, but the extractor activated first. The green gate opened wider, and the tunnel filled with vines. Not normal vines, these were white, thorny, and fast, covered in little mouths that clicked like scissors. They grabbed pipes, weapons, ankles, anything warm. The thieves panicked. The hostages screamed. The gate was not attacking because of me. It was reacting to being stabbed, the way any living thing would. I needed to calm it and stop the thieves at the same time. So I did something that would have sounded insane a month earlier. I fed the gate soup. From storage shadow, I pulled out jars of broth made from moon herbs, frost root, and monster bone marrow. I had been using it to heal small dungeon creatures. I smashed the jars near the gate, letting the smell wash over the vines. The clicking slowed. The vines turned toward the broth. I whispered that I was not here to hurt it. Piper stared at me like I had become a plant therapist. The gate pulsed once. The vines stopped grabbing hostages and focused entirely on the thieves. I respected its priorities. The leader tried to rip the extractor free and run. The vines wrapped his arms. He shouted for me to help him. I walked over slowly. He said he would be crushed. I said he should apologize to the gate. He thought I was joking. The vines tightened. He apologized. The gate pulsed again and released him just enough for me to knock him unconscious with a library cart. Then I placed both hands on the extractor. It was dug deep into the gate's edge. Pulling it out wrong could tear the opening. Leaving it in would drain the core. So I copied the wound. That sounds impossible because it mostly was. I did not copy the gate. I copied the shape of the damage in shadow space, creating a fake injury for the extractor to cling to. Then I used Space Hook to shift the device one fraction at a time, moving each metal leg from real gate to shadow copy. Sweat ran down my face. My arms shook. For once, there was nothing flashy about it. Just control, care, patience. When the last leg released, the extractor snapped into storage shadow, still biting the fake wound. The green gate shrank back to its original size. The vines softened, curling around the broken pipes like tired snakes. One vine touched my wrist. A tiny green seed dropped into my palm. Not a weapon. A thank you. I closed my fingers around it. Above us, the library lights flickered back on. The police took the thieves away. The hostages were safe. The campus called it a miracle, then tried to give me an award at a ceremony, which I avoided by claiming urgent dungeon laundry. That was only half a lie. The seed became one of my strongest tools. Implanted in dungeon soil, it grew into a vine that could sense harmful intent, not evil in some grand magical way, just the sharp, immediate desire to hurt. I planted it in a pot near my apartment door. Within a week, it had wrapped gently around Ben's ankle when he arrived with pizza, ignored Grace completely, and slapped a fake repairman in the face before he could place a listening device on my wall. I named the plant Nothing. Piper named it Bitey. I refused to acknowledge that as official. Bitey grew anyway. After the campus gate, I thought I had earned one quiet night. That night, I entered the pocket gate again. The upper tunnels were quiet now. Goblins no longer attacked me. Some hid, some saluted. One tiny bone knight tried to challenge me, saw Piper wearing the ringmaster hat, and immediately lay down pretending to be defeated. The deep tower elevator waited beneath the waterfall. I had cleared 20 floors. The 21st door glowed gold. Different from the others. Not stronger in the usual way, older, calmer, like it had been waiting since before I was born. I opened it. Inside was a bedroom. Not my bedroom, a room made of stone and starlight, with a bed carved from black crystal and a ceiling full of slow-moving galaxies. At the center stood a chest no taller than my knee. No monsters attacked. No traps clicked. That made me more nervous than any boss. Piper stayed close. I opened the chest. Inside was a key shaped like a tiny gate. When I touched it, memories flashed, not mine, not words, just impressions. Countless pocket gates scattered across hidden corners of the world, under stairs, behind closets, inside wells, beneath abandoned train seats. Little doors too small for disasters, too quiet for official alarms, each one holding strange dungeons, forgotten creatures, and treasures nobody powerful had noticed. My gate was not the only one. It was just the first one I had found. The key sank into my palm and became a mark. A new skill appeared. Gate sense. I stood frozen in the starlight bedroom. Then I felt them. Tiny pulses across the city, across the country, farther than I could understand, some weak, some sleeping, some already opened. And one pulse was close. Too close. In the apartment above mine. My ceiling creaked. A muffled scream came from upstairs. Then something small, angry, and extremely familiar started scratching through the floorboards from the other side. I looked at Piper. Piper looked at me. For once, neither of us made a joke. I crawled out of my pocket gate, rolled into my room, and stared up at the ceiling as dust drifted down. The world thought I had become the strongest because of one secret under my bed. The truth was bigger. There were more doors. More hidden dungeons. More ordinary people about to wake up to impossible blue light and make the same choice I made. Report it. Ignore it. Or farm it. A tiny claw punched through my ceiling. Then another. Ben called my phone at that exact second, because of course he did. I answered while watching the hole widen. He said sensors across the city were picking up small mana spikes, all indoors, all too weak for official gate alarms. Grace came on the line a moment later and asked what I had done. I looked at the glowing mark on my palm. I looked at Piper, who was already sharpening a bone toothpick. I looked at the tiny monster head squeezing through my ceiling, hissing like it owned the place. Then I picked up the same old frying pan I had kept mounted on the wall. I told them I was going upstairs. And as the first new pocket gate opened above me, spilling blue light through the cracks, I smiled. Because once you have farmed a dungeon under your bed, the whole world starts looking like loot.